Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь!
everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, to the Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 320 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine here on the last day of our streaming week. Tomorrow will be our Monday break as normal. But of course, before we enter that Monday break, we always have to run a Sunday fundraiser. And this Sunday fundraiser is for a fundraising legend on this channel. We've run more fundraisers for this nonprofit than any other one in this channel's history. Once again, we are talking about Doctors Without Borders. Doctors Without Borders is my favorite nonprofit out there right now in terms of the support they're able to deliver to the Ukrainians. Not only do they dedicate a massive sum of y'all's support to their operations in the field, something like I believe 82 to 84% of all the donations they receive are actually used in field projects. They also do a lot of help inside of Ukraine. It's one of the areas that they're most active in right now, and not only do they help out soldiers with their injuries here and there in life-saving surgeries, but they also help out, by and large, a massive deal of Ukrainian citizens found anywhere inside of Ukraine. If you see a place where a Ukrainian citizen or a soldier was wounded, Doctors Without Borders is most likely just a few miles away in some kind of a surgery center or something similar, helping these people and helping Ukraine to save their lives. I think that it is the best fundraiser that we could ever pick, and I highly encourage y'all to support tonight's fundraiser, especially with what's going on in the Bakhmut area right now. There are many people, both Ukrainian citizens and soldiers, who are under the gun of Russian artillery and also gunfire directly now in some places, and a decent amount of them do get wounded, and Doctors Without Borders helps these people to live from injuries that otherwise would be fatal. So please make sure to support them. I'm going to be throwing in my $100 right here, and of course, I gotta say this, the Late Spring Army never misses a goal. They never miss the final fundraiser goal, and they never miss the first 10 minutes goal. Every single time we run a fundraiser, the goal is that within the 10-minute countdown, we'll have raised over $1,000 in support of the fundraiser. And tonight, we got up to $1.2 thousand before the anthem even started. Unbelievable. Absolutely incredible. And the support's still rolling in. I got to thank y'all so much for helping out these fundraisers like y'all do. But without me continuing on, let me make sure to... Are you kidding me? It's doing it again. It's doing it again where I can't show my name. One second, y'all. Let me see if I can fix that. Oh my god, that aggravates me. So one second, y'all. I'm trying to make sure that this time my name can pop up. Oh, wait a minute, did it? Yes! Alright, so I got it, and let me put that in. Then give me just a second, everyone. I always do it at this point. I don't do it during the 10-minute countdown, because back in the day when I used to do it during the 10-minute countdown, sometimes so few people were here that they really couldn't see whether I actually did it or not. So now it should pop up probably about 20 seconds before I say this on stream, and waiting for, there we go. There's my donation. So now we are up to 1.6 and rocketing on our way up towards 5K. I'm wondering, can the Lea Spring Army reach the 5K fundraising goal before we reach, let's see, 10:30 Eastern Time or 9:30 local time here? We're in Central Time. Anyways, moving on from everything about the fundraiser, which is what tonight is all about. Of course, we're going to be covering the news, but it's more so about helping out the people inside of Ukraine that we're always reporting on, because that would be very selfish of us to sit here and report about what is going on there each and every day and not even have a care in the world about the people on the ground. So that's why we run these fundraisers, and that's why we put a massive emphasis on them on Sundays when they happen, because while news is great, helping these people out is as important, if not more important. So with that, we're going to be moving on into Poland, into Warsaw, because y'all may have seen the thumbnail, and it's talking about German Leopards on the way. Now, this is something that's been very interesting, because, of course, we already heard the German Minister of Defense yesterday say that the next time the Germans send support, the Leopard will be on the way, making it sound almost like a guarantee. And it appears that it may be done not through the Germans, but, like I was saying yesterday, through the Polish, because not only are the Polish saying that they will be sending Leopards into Ukraine, they are now being backed up by none other than the Finns. the Finnish are now backing up the Polish in their idea of sending Leopard 2s to Ukraine. And right here you can see an article from The Telegraph, which is a United Kingdom news reporting company. And while, you know, we'd never really trust mainstream news on this channel or use them, this article is being repeated time and time again throughout the entirety of all mainstream news outlets, and it is something that we were able to confirm outside of the news articles. But what this article is basically saying is that Poland and Finland are somewhat teaming up to either send their Leopards to Ukraine and get replacements, or to send those Leopards to Ukraine with no idea of a replacement anytime here in the future to help out the Ukrainians. Both Poland and Finland both use Leopard 2s of different kinds. So I'll actually show you all the kinds that we're talking about real quick, because the Polish actually have a really interesting looking Leopard 2. There is this called a Leopard 2 PL. Leopard 2 PL is practically brand new, introduced into service in the year 2020, which was just 2 years ago. It has a little bit of a different frontal armor layout than the normal German Leopard 2 A5s and A6s that many people are used to, but from what we know, I believe these things are actually pretty decent in number. There's anywhere in between 34 to 142 of these things inside of Poland. Say what?
DCC Prime put in a
Oh my
$500
God!
donation.
DCC Prime is slaughtering cheese. It's $500. Yeah. And so, thank you so much for supporting Doctors Without Borders like that. That's unbelievable. I wonder if anyone's going to try and top you tonight. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Anyways, getting back to the Leopard 2 PL, it is a little bit different in its armor layout, but once again, it is, at the very end of the day, another Leopard 2, and these things are as competent as the German versions. In fact, considering that this is being introduced into service and kind of being custom built in the current day, the current few years that we've been living in, recently, of course, all of y'all are still alive, so y'all been living in them recently, I'm at least assuming, or y'all are just getting through them day by day, like I am drinking coffee. But anyways, moving on from that, it is probably a little bit more advanced in terms of its imaging systems and sights than a normal Leopard 2. We can't really confirm that, though, because a decent amount of that information is usually kept classified or under wraps, but considering that it is a brand new Leopard 2 being made in 2020 specifically for Poland, there may be some technological advancements in the 2PL that we do not see in other variants of the Leopard 2. And also, moving on from the Polish Leopard 2 PLs, which are on the table, we also know of the Finnish Leopard 2 A6s, I believe, if I'm correct. So let me go and find y'all a picture of these. And I've got to tell y'all, not only do the Finnish have an amazing YouTube channel that really shows off their armed forces very well, they also have really nice camouflages for their Leopard 2s. These are not special like the Leopard 2 PL being brand new and custom made for Poland. These are just normal Leopard 2 A6s like you would find in the German Heer, which is their military. And that's kind of a misnomer because a lot of people always call the German army the Bundeswehr, but the Bundeswehr is pretty much the German word for the military, and then the Heer is specifically the army. But moving on from that, it's exactly the same as a German Leopard 2 A6. There's not really a lot of changes to it, not really a lot of variations, but that does guarantee one thing. This thing is up to the German Ministry of Defense spec, which means that this tank will be fairly competent. The Leopard 2 PL, of course, is also probably incredibly competent as well, considering it has to meet NATO requirements and standards, and it is newer in terms of its year of production, so it may have some integrated ergonomics that are improved. Also, one last thing, the winter camo on Finnish tanks is, by God, I gotta say, like one of the best. It just looks so good. What do you think about that, Matthew?
It is quite nice, actually. I like it's combined with the green and everything.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, like the Scandinavian countries, if anyone does camouflage as well for their tanks, the Scandinavian countries as a whole are generally above everyone else. Let me see if I can find you the Swedish winter camo. Not winter. Winter camo. And let me see if I can find it. Tank winter camo. I'll see if I can show it to you. Yeah, here we go. Let me scroll down a little bit and find you the good example of this. This is the Swedish winter camo.
Oh, I like that one a hell of a lot better. That one is so cool looking.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Like, I don't know who in the world the people are who are traveling around Scandinavia offering paint jobs for these tanks, but whoever is doing it is doing a really good job, and I would highly recommend that the United States sees about it trying to implement some of these, because they are so good looking. I mean, like, just from a aesthetics perspective, Scandinavian camos like the Finnish are using are very good, and also the Swedish I think are top notch. Anyways, moving on from that little rabbit hole about the camouflages, these Leopard 2s could provide a massive amount of improvements to the Ukrainian armor that we currently see them using. Right now, a lot of the Ukrainian armed forces are using T-64 Oplots, so I'll pull those up for y'all real quick. And y'all may actually realize that that is pretty much the exact same thing we have in the thumbnail right now, but let me find y'all a normal version. This is a T-64 Oplot. It is a upgraded version of the normal T-64 with a decent amount of explosive reactive armor added on, and also some improved optic systems. So, largely improved overall. However, not a lot of Ukrainian tanks are up to the T-64 Oplot standard, or the Oplot standard for any of the variants. They also have a T-84 called the Oplot, and I'll pull that one up for y'all real quick to show y'all what that one looks like as well. This is the T-84 Oplot. Very similar looking. They generally have almost the same armor package. That's why they're both called an Oplot. But not all of them are up to the standard. A lot of Ukrainian tanks are either T-72Bs, which I'll pull up for y'all to see again. T-72Bs, which are literally comparable to their Soviet or Russian counterpart that we see right now. Saying Soviet is a little bit of a misnomer because both of the countries right now, in terms of armor, are using Soviet-era equipment. We can see that is a T-72B right there. They are also using a decent amount of T-64BVs. The Ukrainians have a lot of these. The reason you do not see many T-64BVs in Russian use is because T-64s were phased out either in favor of the T-80 or the T-72, depending on which unit was receiving what tank, because T-64s are a little bit more expensive to maintain and operate. And the Ukrainians maintain these after the collapse of the Soviet Union because Ukraine actually had a decent amount of these inside of their territory and also the infrastructure to take care of them. Still, getting on from that point, these tanks, while being decent and while being on par with the Russians, being on par does not win you a war, and it does not win any kind of engagements if a tank ever goes up against another one, and we have seen that a little bit in this war. And the Leopard 2, like the Leopard 2 PL, has a lot of massive improvements when looking at something like the T-64BV. To start off, the gun's armor penetration with the shells it can fire with a Leopard 2 PL is assumed to be higher than a T-64BV, considering that a T-64BV came around in about I believe the 60s or the 70s, if I'm correct, and the Leopard 2s were coming out around the late 70s and the early 80s. So we can assume that just based off of the age gap in between the vehicles, the Leopard 2 PL will have a variety of higher armor-piercing rounds, APFSDS shells, that it can fire at Russian tanks and destroy much easier. Another thing that the Leopard 2 PL has over a Russian tank is the ammo storage. In a T-64BV, the ammo is usually stored in a carousel at the bottom of the tank, which can cause it to explode quite easily if it's hit. It's pretty much a death trap. Also, because of all the ammo being piled right under the turret, when it explodes, it usually makes the turret go flying, which is what we call around here a turret toss. In case you all are ever wondering where that term came from, that's the reason why. The Leopard 2, the way it stores its ammo is it stores it all under the front plate somewhere around right here. And that's pretty much where all the ammo is, as far as I remember, based off of what I've seen of insides of a Leopard 2. I believe there is also some at the back of the turret, but I may be in... Wait a minute, no. I'm very certain that there is some at the rear of the turret in a blowout panel. So, by and large, crew safety is improved due to the way the ammo is stored, and you're not going to see the tank get detonated just from a simple hit. The armor is also a little bit thicker on Leopard 2s on the front end, and they do not rely on, I guess you could say, ERA variants of armor like we see a lot of Russian tanks doing, like this T-64BV, to try and at least make it somewhat competent. The armor is built in, and from what we know, it is decently strong. And so for all those reasons, Leopard 2 could provide a massive advantage to the Ukrainians, and crew survivability and also the efficiency of armored units using these vehicles will be vastly increased because of that. So hopefully we'll see these things within the next week and a half, and thank you all so much for watching this TED Talk on why the Leopard 2 should go to Ukraine. Anyways, we're going to be moving on to the next bit of news outside of the massive news that we saw today with the Polish and the Finnish joining together to send that over. And we're now going to be moving on into, let me make sure we don't have any, we don't have any international news left. We're now going to be moving on into Belgrade, near the small town of Shepakino, where we saw some explosions, or heard some explosions, in the distance near the town. But we haven't really gotten a good explanation to this yet, and why this happened. We hear the explosions in the distance. We can't really see them all too well. And now the video appears to have been cut a little bit. From what it sounds kind of like artillery blasts, but we can't really tell for certain. All we're hearing is the report of the explosion. And there it goes again. But there's been no clear answer as to what this is and why it's happening. Is this something caused by the Russians? Is this something caused by the Ukrainians? Nobody really has a straight answer, once again, and we're trying to still figure out what this is. Speaking about something that we did figure out from last night, we did find out that it was true that a Ukrainian MiG-29 was shot down in friendly fire yesterday by an S-300 battery somewhere in the area of northern Ukraine. And from what we were able to collect, the pilot did survive with minor injuries. So luckily the pilot was able to be saved. And once again, to go over that story and to continue over that question from yesterday, yes, the aircraft was shot down, but considering the amount of activity that the Ukrainian Air Force has been involved in and how heavily trafficked the Ukrainian airspace has been with all kinds of weapons, whether they be cruise or ballistic missiles, drones, or in aircraft and helicopters, it is really surprising to see that the Ukrainians have only ended up shooting down over 10.5 months of the war so far, only one of their own aircraft. In the middle of the Gulf War, the coalition shot down several of our own aircraft in incidents of friendly fire, and the amount of units involved at that point was somewhat, well, actually about twice as much, but still, even if you scale up the Ukrainian friendly fire incidences, it's about half of what we saw the coalition enduring during Desert Storm. So they're doing quite well in terms of avoiding friendly fire. And of course, while an unfortunate incident, one always has to point out that it's been such a small occurrence. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news out of Belgrade and on into our location unknowns, because we've actually seen some pretty wild ones today. The first one we saw was a rare sight of the Ukrainians using their S-300s. The reason why we don't see Ukrainian S-300s get used much is because usually they're trying to conserve the ammunition, considering that S-300 ammo comes from Russia, and there's really no one else that can provide it. So here's a rare sighting of them using one today, and interestingly enough, according to the caption, it's being used to shoot down an Orlan 10, which is a very small surveillance drone. So apparently that Orlan was either getting around something very sensitive, or there was nothing else in the area to shoot it down, and so they had to use an S-300. When we see the... That's just really cool. You gotta admit, that is super cool. Because the missile pops out of its silo, and then it tilts itself towards the direction it needs to go, and then the solid propellant fires off. I mean, that's just cool. You now see the missile traveling on its way. There it goes, just streaking through the sky, off into the horizon. It appears that the propellant has now expended itself. And we can see the explosion right out there, right above the top of the trees, letting us know that it hit the Orlan and shot that thing down. So, good to know. Unfortunately, they had to use an S-300 to do it, but still, a very impressive look at the Ukrainian S-300s that have been orbiting the country kind of a little bit ever since the beginning of the war, and we rarely ever get to see them in use, and when they do get used, it seems as though they are fairly effective. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we also saw a slow-mo video of my favorite SPG so far provided in the war, the Caesar, provided by France, firing in the night. And so here's the video. And you can actually see the shell up there. That little orb is the shell. And now it's finally disappeared from the camera. And that's the end of that video, but really cool look at the Caesar. There are several of these in Ukraine that the French have provided. The French are, of course, providing even more interesting vehicles, such as the AMX-10 RC, which I cannot wait to see how the Ukrainians use them and how they perform in Ukraine. But right now, the French have really set the standard in terms of self-propelled guns with the Caesar SPG. I believe it utilizes the principle of shoot and scoot to the maximum. The Ukrainians only have one homemade version of the Caesar, which is called the Bodana, which uses a lot of either former Soviet or Ukrainian-made equipment to make a similar vehicle. But the French, I believe, have really refined what a truck-mounted artillery piece is in the Caesar SPG. And from what we've heard from crews that operated, it is a vehicle to be feared as far as the Russians are concerned, and one to be in awe of here in the West. It is really the peak efficiency of an artillery unit. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we also saw some Ukrainian soldiers handing out Coke to the kids. Now, that kind of sounds wrong from the original standpoint, but it's Coca-Cola, so it sounds better that way. So here's the video. I mean, like, if this was Colombia, we could probably assume it would not be Coca-Cola, but still. We're gonna mute the music. We can see them driving down the road, some kids hanging out on the side of the road. See them looking at the car, they're like, what's up? And then they're like, yeah, what do you need, man? Like, they're like, what's up? You see him handing away some snacks. And some Coca-Cola! We are not sponsored by Coca-Cola, but that is some very good ad placement right there, or I guess you could say some brand placement. And so with that, that's the end of that little clip. And once again, nice to see the Ukrainian soldiers just every once in a while do something for charity and hand out some Coca-Cola and some snacks to some kids on the side of the road, just so that way they know the military, as far as the Ukrainians go, is pretty cool. Well, that we're moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we also saw a Ukrainian soldier warming his feet. Now, as you know, Matthew, cold weather is cold.
Indeed.
And so sometimes you get really cold.
All right.
All right. And so if you get cold, what do you try and do, Matthew?
I don't know. I'm trying to keep up with this chat right now.
Oh yeah, it is going a million miles an hour, I will admit, to say the least. But what you do when you get cold is you try and warm yourself. And one of the most important things to keep warm on your body in the cold is your feet, because a lot of your blood will eventually flow through your feet. And so if you have on some pretty warm socks, generally I guess you could say your body will not feel as cold. So making sure that your feet are well insulated is incredibly important. And we saw a Ukrainian soldier taking this to heart today as he took a blowtorch to his foot. Literally. He started to blow a blowtorch straight onto his boots to try and heat up his toes. Also, we gotta mute the music because while it is absolute bop, we cannot play it. I mean, you see this guy has been at it so much, his boots are turning black, but I bet you his toes are warm. You know, I'm just wondering if that's a good way to waterproof his shoe.
You're flaming it with a torch?
Yeah, you know, like get the waterproofing wax, and then get a blowtorch and just use a blowtorch to get it in the leather. I think that'll actually work fairly well. I don't know, I'd have to try it and find out, but this guy's toes are certainly warm right now, I will tell you that. And so with that, that's the end of this clip, and we're now moving on to the last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a direct hit. And so here's the video. When you hear the Stugna on its way, when you see that this man has pulled out the camera, so that way they can upload this to WorldStar, and then you hit the vehicle. We can now see them looking at a second vehicle and firing. You now see it on the way and hitting. And so it looks like they destroyed a Ural 4320 and also some kind of a T-series tank. Whether it was a T-72, a T-80, or another version, a T-62, we don't really know. But they did knock the thing out, and it is gone for good. So if that's nothing to be happy about, I don't know what is. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this a bit of Location Unknown news, and we're now going to be moving a little bit inside of Ukraine near the area of Poltava, where we saw the National Police go through some efforts to save a dog.
До Зараз вилізеш і побіжиш. Допомагаємо собачці. Ось так
See him
собачка
looking
бігла,
down into the pit. And this video is having to
попала в
load.
яму. Зараз ми
We
будемо
see a dog
пробувати
down there in some nasty water.
з допомогою
Oh,
дверей
man.
якось піднімати наверх.
I don't know how they got down there.
I don't really know. I think it was just wandering around and it fell in the hole. They're going to see about getting that dog out of there, so they're going to place the door in
І
there.
туди, да, на ту сторону. Ну зараз випрыгни на нього. Давай, давай. О.
And now they're tilting
Іди
it
сюди.
over.
Іди, іди, малий. Іди, іди. Розумний
You now
пес.
see
Іди,
the dog
іди,
going
іди,
to the
іди.
door,
Давай,
pondering
давай,
the
давай,
door,
давай.
and now it's going to start trying to climb the door.
Давай, 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 давай. Степанович, тільки не малий.
Now see the cop trying to shove the door a little bit further down, so that way the dog can get up it a little bit easier. He's now going to grab it by the neck
Бери, бери.
and pull it up out of the pit, saving the dog from its unfortunate demise in the hole. And now you can see the dog walking off.
Іди, іди.
You see the dog's a little skittish, but he wants some petting.
Зіга. Він же бідний, бачиш, як виход. Давно тут уже.
That dog looks like it's got some nice
Ось
fur.
таке добре діло зробили.
And now you see, it's literally going to the light. It's just crawling out of the hole. He's like, well, I'm going to the light now.
Давай. Отрихайся, все. На, красавчик.
But I gotta say, what an effort by the Ukrainian National Police to help out that dog. You know, like, yeah, and think about this, because we always see these videos a dime a dozen. You know, it's like, nowadays, it's like, oh, you know, what's even special about this video? But what's special about each one of these instances is that these policemen could have just walked off and left that dog in that hole to die, and it wouldn't have mattered. No one would have even known. And there's so many things going on in this war that are so important that no one would have really even had the time to care. These policemen were probably on some kind of a rotation off of a front line somewhere where they're being used as light infantry or recon, and they're just sitting there hanging out in this town, and they hear a dog whimpering, and they decide, instead of just sitting around and relaxing, they're going to spend their free time to help try and get this dog out of that hole. And you got to give people a lot of respect for that, because that isn't something they have to do. That's something that they're making a choice about, and it's a choice of compassion, something we don't see a lot of people doing a lot these days here in the Ukraine war, especially on the Russian side. But the Ukrainians, every single time, they're presented with the option of either doing nothing or stepping up and helping out any way they can, whether it be saving citizens, saving dogs, saving entire cities. They always step up to the task and do it beyond belief. And so with that, that's the end of that little clip. Just wanted to show it to y'all because I thought it was really nice. And we actually saw something really interesting in Kharkiv today as well. And this may be why this National Guard unit, well, this National Police unit, was able to go behind the lines and have a little bit of a break to have a chance to save that dog. We saw that the United States, Matthew, has sent something that they never told anyone about.
What would that be?
Something very secret. Secret. Now, you know, have you ever heard of the HIMARS X project?
I have not. I've heard of the Abrams X, but not the HIMARS.
So the HIMARS X project was a project brought forth by DARPA in the early 1990s to see if they could make a cheaper and more cost-affordable version of the HIMARS that could be attached to normal infantry units and brigades, so that way they could use the artillery at a much more efficient pace due to the cost, and it could be used a lot more. And we've actually seen one of these very rare HIMARS X projects. There's only 2 of them that we know of that have ever been photographed. We actually saw one of them in the Kharkiv area today.
Interesting.
So here's the video, and I think y'all are going to get blown away by this. It's the HIMARS X project.
Wait, that's it? For real?
No, I'm just kidding. It's a car, but
I was about to say.
But this guy is so into the HIMARS that he's made a little HIMARS mock-up launcher and put some Ukrainian flags on top of his car, and he's riding around town with this on his car.
Does it work?
But no, it doesn't work. And by the way, everyone, I was just kidding to build up to this because this is hilarious. I can't believe someone in Ukraine is this into the HIMARS, so I had to come up with a funny story to make y'all laugh about this one, but still, pretty crazy. You gotta give it to this guy. That looks just like the HIMARS launcher on the back of an M142. Oh,
I think it
man.
might work.
Maybe it would. I mean, like, maybe they could put some bottle rockets in that thing and turn it into a small MLRS. I don't know, but still, really cool all around. And I got to give it to this guy. This guy loves the HIMARS. I can't blame him. It's a really good MLRS if there ever is one. Honestly, I don't even think the HIMARS is an MLRS. It is in definition, but it's so much better than any other MLRS there is in the world. It's like, is it even in that category anymore, or is it something entirely different? But still, pretty cool. Hope you all got a laugh out of that whole build-up and the story and everything, because that's not real. There was no HIMARS X project. The only development of the HIMARS there ever was just for the M142 and also the M270 Mars, but still, really cool. Anyways, we're gonna
This is how like weapons inventors legends like get their start, is doing stuff like this.
Yeah, this guy right here who did the little HIMARS thing on top of the car. The Ukrainians are probably going to start a bid in the future for some kind of a new light machine gun, and he'll be the one to answer the call with a real, very functional light machine gun.
Yes, maybe so.
You know an interesting story, Matt. You know the M1 Garand, the rifle that was used in the Second World War?
Yes.
Did you know that John Garand, the guy who designed that, never had any firearms expertise in building one before? And it wasn't before. It was before the Garand. Let me explain the story a little bit better. So the guy John Garand, he was a machine shop guy. He just worked in a machine shop. And one day he saw a advertisement in the papers, because back in the day the army was just pretty straightforward with this stuff in the papers. We would like a new light machine gun. Could anyone step up and design us one? So he just looked at that as a machine shop guy and was like, I think I could probably do that. And so he came up with a prototype and showed it to the military. It didn't win, but they were so impressed with what he had come up with that the Army invited him to design a new battle rifle for the U.S. Army, and then that's how the M1 Garand was born.
Huh. And it seems like maybe sometimes it's better if an outsider like comes in and tries to design something new, because the people that have been in the industry for too long, they have the same ideas and they're simply like recreating it 1,000 times over.
Yeah.
Like seriously speaking, that could be like maybe the next Ukraine weapons designer that comes out, the guy with the HIMARS on top of the truck.
And also that's just like the story of it's not the L82 sniper rifle. Hang on, wait a minute. I think it may. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's another rifle that the British came up with, because the British also apparently made the Barrett, the L82 Barrett 50 cal gun. But moving on from that, there was another rifle that the British made that was made by like 3 guys in a garden shed, which is also really funny. Have you ever heard that one, Matthew?
I have not.
So these 3 guys in Britain were in a garden shed, and they heard that the British Army was looking for a brand new lightweight sniper rifle to be designed for special forces use and also marksman use. So these guys were like, oh, we could do that, like just like John Garand, kind of like a machine shop thing. So they designed the sniper rifle in a garden shed in their backyard. And you know how big British houses are and how big garden sheds are. They're not that big, but they designed this thing in that little garden shed, showed it to the Army. And the British Army was like, wow, this thing's amazing. It's like blowing every other competitor out of the water. How have we never heard of these people before? And I think someone just said it. I think it is the L9. So let me pull that up. L9 sniper rifle. I think this is it. This is it. The L9 right here. That's the gun.
Oh, that's pretty cool looking. I like that one.
So they designed it, made it. The Army was impressed, and so the Army was like, we're going to send out an acquisitions officer to come and meet with y'all and check out y'all's workshop, so that way we can make sure that this contract can go forward, because they wanted to see if these people had the ability to manufacture these in mass. So these guys were like, well, they can't come to the garden shed, because then they'll know we're just random people doing this thing and they won't accept the contract. So they went and rented out a manufactory and filled it with different versions of the L96 that they had made in varying, I guess you could say, degrees of completion. And then when the acquisitions officer showed up and they were the only 3 guys in there, he said, well, where is the rest of your workers? And they said, oh, they're out on lunch break. And so the guy sat there and joked with them and said, the whole reason they sent me out here was just to make sure that you guys weren't some folks in a garden shed making rifles, because then we wouldn't accept the contract. And then they made the contract anyways, and then they found out later that they were just 3 guys in a garden shed.
Wow, so they duped him and then got the contract
Yeah,
anyway.
they duped the entire British government and still got the contract to make these rifles. So I don't know.
That's cheeky, bruv.
That's cheeky, bruv. It's someone's about it sucks, but anyways, is it really cool stories about people just coming up with improv stuff, and considering how accurate that was to the original M142 launcher, at least in its external appearance, maybe that guy's got a future in arms development. I don't know,
And I saw Diffuse 56 say, "How about the M1
Oh my
carbine
God!
designed by a convict?" What was that?
Anonymous just donated $1,000.
Dang,
Good Lord,
Anonymous, who are you? We want to know.
Someone's about to say, "Thank you, Anonymous." That's a person. It's the anonymous person. We do not know who you are, but I thank you so much for that $1,000 donation, because you are helping out Doctors Without Borders massively and just got us 20% of the way on your own to the goal. We're now up to 4.9. We're less than $100 away from the $5,000 goal tonight. Less than 50 minutes into the stream. I wonder if in the next 3 minutes we can reach 5,000. That would be insane. But anyways, let's get back onto this. And also, real quick, man, do you want to wrap that up? Because I think I interrupted you there with my disbelief of that donation.
Yes, I think it's too far up the chat. I'm not sure where it went.
Dang it. Well, anyways, I guess we'll use this moment to move on and into Odessa real quick, considering that that's not really attached to any front line before we actually get into frontline news, where we saw that the Ukrainians had found another sea mine that had somehow detached itself from its mooring at sea and it now drifted onto an Odessa beach. You know, I wonder if whenever the sappers in the Odessa area see another mine washed up on the beach, they go, "Son of a beach!" and then they go out there and defuse it. We now see them defusing the mine. It's literally one of those cartoon mines you see, Matthew, like they put on the cartoons where they roll it around and like they throw it onto something and it explodes.
Yeah.
It's so weird to see them because you never think that the mines look like that in real life, the sea mines, but they do. Wait a minute.
All right.
They connected this thing to a fuse. They're doing an old
We hit
cowboy trick.
$5,000.
Yeah, let's go! We've already done it. We've reached 5,000.
Oh, wait a minute. It's jumping between 4.9 and 5,000. I'm not sure which one it is.
Oh, no, it's 5,000 now.
5.1.
Hey, we did it. We reached $5.1 thousand already. We've reached the goal. I think this has got to be the quickest we've ever reached the $5,000 mark on a fundraiser. Like usually we reach it at like 50 to 54 minutes. We reached it at 48 minutes tonight. Man, absolutely.
And also, Susie Halsey, the pants are on.
No,
They were to begin with.
Well, I don't even know what that's about. But anyways, $5,000 has been raised. That is absolutely impressive. And I got to thank the Leaf Spring Army once again for making this possible. And also, Matthew, join me real quick in a little bit of an Igor. So on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Wait, headphones down, headphone volume down.
Oh, yeah.
Don't want to ruin them.
A volume warning. Your eardrums are about to get blown out. So 3, 2, 1. Igor! But anyways, we did it, and I can't believe it. And I got to thank you all so much once again for supporting this fundraiser and sending in donations to help out Doctors Without Borders. That help will eventually make it to the front line where Doctors Without Borders is operating and help to save citizens and soldiers who have nearly been mortally wounded with the life-saving surgeries that Doctors Without Borders provides. And I got to thank you all so much once again for always helping us to reach these goals, and I can't believe we've been able to do it this long. It's just a few weeks away from the 365th day in this war, and we are still reaching fundraiser goals this far into it. I honestly still kind of get a little bit of a laugh out of it, because I remember back in the day, people I used to talk to that I knew in person about these fundraisers would say things like, eventually people are going to run out of care and also money to support Ukraine with. These fundraisers won't last forever. And I used to say, no, they will last forever, because I believe in them. I know everyone else believes in them, and they will continue to always reach the goals. They'll never stop reaching their goals. And tonight, you'll prove me right again. The support is still here amongst all of y'all to help out Ukraine. Y'all still have the will to help out, and we're still reaching these fundraiser goals, which is unbelievable this late in the war. I believe we're getting close to like our 50th fundraiser here soon. And it's crazy to think we're still reaching goals. It just is beyond me. Also, the total raised is somewhere around $730,000 at this moment. Not getting into an exact number count, but it is very close to $732,000. And so with that, we're going to get back to the sea mine blowing up. We see the thing blow up. Oh, wait! That thing left a crater. Jeez. Dang. Imagine that thing blowing up on the side of a ship. That thing would go down for sure.
Jeez, yeah, I would say.
Man. Like, good lord, I don't know. Maybe instead of using excavators to dig holes, maybe they just need to get a sea mine and throw that thing down in a pit or something, because that thing will dig a hole. But with that, we're gonna
Call this thing the Moskva 3000.
yeah. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from Odessa and on into the northeastern front, starting off with an area just north of Troitske and in the small town of Lanchertivka, where we saw some partisans blowing up a railroad track today, which will be helping out very close to the front lines in terms of the war effort and stopping Russian supplies from reaching their destination. But, of course, I would be totally amiss going into this next segment and going through the rest of the news without taking a quick pause, so that way we can recognize every single poll that we've run tonight and also address them, and also recognize all of the donors that have sent in support, massive amounts of support to help this fundraiser to get to where it is. Now, before we name off all of y'all, I would like to say this, and I always feel good knowing that we've been able to raise so much, and bad whenever we get to this part, because sadly there are so many of y'all that are so well-intentioned and good of heart that we can't call out every single one of y'all. But know this, we do see y'all's names whenever y'all send in donations to these fundraisers, and we do personally thank each and every one of y'all. If we could find the time to make sure to cover this news and also name out every single one of y'all, we could, but sadly we can't. So to those people we aren't able to call out, I still want to thank y'all all so much once again for helping out this fundraiser. Y'all are a massive part and the backbone of how these fundraisers get as far as they do. And so with that, let's hear out the people who have been able to help this fundraiser get to $5.4 thousand.
All right, folks. So we're up to $5.5 thousand now. Thanks to Jim Toy, who put in a 50-pound donation. Let me add that to the list real quick.
That's heavy.
So, yes, 50 pounds. Can you even pick that up in force?
Well, yeah. What the hell? Yeah.
25 pounds is my limit. So, anyways, we have a very long list of donors here, and it's been a very busy chat night, and I must admit, it has put me to the limit tonight, but I think I've kept up. Hopefully, I haven't missed any. First up, we have that $500 donation from DCC Prime 1. Very generous, so we called out earlier. We also have that $1,000 from Anonymous, and we still don't know who that is, but the person out there that put that in, thank you very much. That was also very generous of you. Then we have a $250 donation from Darren Maynard. We have several 100s. The first one is from Hal Rose. We have one from Malachite or Malachite, I can't remember how it's said. Activista, Sharon Tukolsky, Zoan Tran, Avir Anthony, BC Skyman, Rocky Rhodes, and then we have a 69 nice donation from Psyops. Then we have a $50 donation from Alvari Mandubratis. We have one from Enforcer for President, Misk77. Enforcer for President once again. Then we have a 50 from Terrence Custer, Rumpelstiltskin, I think, maybe. And then we have one from Benjamin Rude, Axel K, Jamie W, Robert S, Gene Kustra, Marion Diemert, and that one from Jim Toy that we saw just a moment ago. So, thank you all very much for the support of the fundraiser. We are $500 above goal, and a big ol'
yeehaw, yeehaw. And I gotta thank y'all once again for helping us to get that far. But with that, let's get on into those polls, and let's hear what has been going on there, Matthew, because I don't know how many you've been able to run, probably only one, considering how busy you've been, but let's hear it.
Well, I've actually run two, believe it or not.
No way.
On only one cup of Keurig coffee, believe it or not. But anyways.
Get out of here. Get out. You're lying, aren't you?
No, I'm telling the actual truth here. The first one says...
Like cap? Like
no cap.
Oh my God.
No cap. But the first one says, are leopards becoming a reality for Ukraine? 79% said yes, the leopards may be coming soon. 17% said unsure, and 4% said no, it is highly unlikely. Now, I saw a viewer in the live chat earlier point out that we did not even know when the Bradleys were actually being sent to Ukraine, and before we even knew it, they were actually there, and then we heard about it out of the blue. So I think it's very possible, and I think it may be coming very soon, especially with that information we just learned tonight. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're definitely on the horizon. I would say within the next week and a half to 2 weeks, we will see that the announcement has been made, and they will either be already on their way into Ukraine, or they will be beginning the process of being loaded, accounted for, and then sent into Ukraine to then be used by them. I can't really imagine the reality of that, Matthew, because with these next additions of equipment for the Ukrainians that are coming over these next few weeks, we're already looking at the AMX-10 RCs, the Bradleys, and the Martyrs being confirmed that they will be sent to Ukraine. We're now going to be hearing that Leopard 2s are going to be sent to Ukraine as well, and we're now going to be seeing serious, what people usually associate with the military, serious firepower being used by the Ukrainians for support of their infantry. We're going to be seeing things like the Bradley. We're going to be seeing Leopard 2s actually in operation against a real enemy. No longer will they be on training fields and firing ranges. They will actually be going toe-to-toe with the Russian military, and we'll get to see how well these things really stack up against the Russians. It'll, of course, be blowing the Russians out of the water. Technologically, we have something like a 20-year gap in between them and us, even right now. But it's going to be crazy to see that, because only in a fictional world up until now, someone would have thought that a Leopard 2 A6 and a T-72 would actually have the chance to go head-to-head with each other. That was not even in the realm of reality just a year ago, and now we're going to be seeing that they will be here soon.
I think those are going to be huge, a humongous game changer when those get there.
Oh, I think they will, and I'm just totally in disbelief at this. And another thing that we're seeing is that the West is practically providing all of their equipment at this point, save a few things like the aircraft and also helicopters and some tanks like the Abrams. We're providing almost everything that the West and the NATO alliance uses to Ukraine. And here in the West, without having to fire a single shot on our own, we are getting to see how well these things actually scale up against Russian forces. Every single day, we're getting valuable data here in the West and how Russian units behave, how they operate in a full-on war, and how our equipment can actually counter and destroy them, from what we've seen so far with everything sent, with relative ease. And I think that's something that will definitely be either affirming Western doctrines and showing that we are moving in the right direction, or it'll be showing us things that we need to implement and change within our doctrine, so that way we can keep toe-to-toe with either the, well, we're not really needing to keep toe-to-toe with the Russians anymore. I mean, like, look at them. They're still, they're still getting beat to death in Ukraine by the Ukrainians. I think we'll probably be seeing about changing our doctrine if there ever was a land war or a naval war with the Chinese. But then again, none of the information we're getting from Ukraine is applicable to a naval setting, because no naval activity, no naval action has actually occurred in between the Ukrainian Navy and the Russian Navy, mostly because the Ukrainian Navy really doesn't exist. But we still saw, that's still funny though, Matthew, when I say that. It's still funny because somehow the Ukrainians, without a real navy, sunk the flagship of the only fleet that the Russians have in that area.
That is crazy, really.
Yeah, that is just crazy when you really think about it, because it's like, like the people on the Moskva, man, they must have felt invincible until they got hit. Because there was nothing out there that could actually compete against the Moskva, at least on paper. There was no ship, there was no anti-ship missile at that time that could reach out and hit it or destroy it, because the Moskva had countermeasures that could probably take out a couple of them. There was nothing in the world, up until the day that Moskva sank, that could sink the Moskva, according to the Russians or anyone else in the world, until it happened. And that must have been a massive slap of reality in those guys' faces, to have to abandon the largest ship in the Black Sea Fleet and just sail away on a lifeboat, watching that thing slow. Well, actually, if I remember correctly, almost everyone died on the Moskva, so not really a lot of people got to see it sinking, but, the ones that did, they got to see it. So, so getting back from that comments and statement, that's still something interesting to think about. Maybe, just maybe, we're seeing data from that as well, and not really going into the land war side of things. Maybe the Taiwanese are getting some valuable information about how they can fight a much larger and more superior navy without really having a large navy that can compare directly to their adversary. That may be something that they got from that and they're learning from.
That could be.
Yeah, that could be. The possibilities are endless here, but getting back to the Leopard, it is almost a guaranteed certainty at this point. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and let's get on into the next one.
All right. And before we get into our next poll, real quick, I want to call out a $50 donation from Dad Good that came in just a moment ago. And also, we have found the $1,000 donator. It is L. Colston. So a big old yee-haw for L. Colston. Well, I almost flipped back in my chair just then. But anyways, also, shout out to Gary Moore for putting in a $50 as well. We're currently up to $5.7 thousand. So we're still making progress, even though we've hit the goal. So big thanks to all of you.
And I gotta say, I mean, it's really impressive. I can't believe that we're still getting this far. And man, I don't know what to say. If y'all think that's impressive, I think I don't know. But if y'all do think that's impressive that we've reached $5.7 thousand, put an LSA in the live chat for us so that way we can see if people really think this is impressive or not. Because I would be interested to see. Also, I don't mean to make your job a little bit easy, a little bit more difficult, Matthew. I mean, I'm sorry about this. But if y'all would like to just spam the live chat for a little bit, I would be appreciative of that. I think it would be pretty fun. Anyways, with that, let's get on into the next poll while Matthew starts to nervously sweat over there about what's probably to come. So, Matt, on to the next one.
And our next poll says the UK and Netherlands to co-host a major meeting on Russian war crimes. Will it be productive? 55% said most likely, we need to set the framework. 20% said unlikely, it's just more talk. 15% said Russia will never be held liable. And 10% said unsure. So on this one, it's kind of intriguing. I've only seen the preliminary information about the meeting, so I'm not really sure exactly what it entails. But I think it's important to set the framework. But there's really no telling if it'll actually be productive or not. There's really no way to know right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that. Let's see. You know, I'm looking at this live chat, Matthew. It's going so quickly. It actually distracted me from what my point was. Could you just reread the prompt for me real quick again?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Nervously laughs as the live chat goes a million miles an hour.
The UK and Netherlands to co-host a major meeting on Russian war crimes. Will it be productive?
I don't think it'll be incredibly productive beyond just agreeing that the Russians are war criminals, which most people have already agreed upon. So, in my opinion, not quite. It's not going to be making any Russian war criminals become accountable for their actions. It won't be punishing them for their actions. So rather than just saying they are war criminals, I don't think it's going to be achieving much more than that. And so I hope that addresses the poll, in my opinion, fairly well. And with that, let's get on into some questions real quick, because I think that was your last poll.
It was. And real quick, Enforcer, stall for me because I'm going to have to put the slow mode on, or otherwise we're going to lose all of our questions and donations and stuff.
All right, so we're going to be stalling right now, and I'm going to tell y'all a really neat story while we stall. Did y'all know that the first thing a Spitfire aircraft ever shot down was another Spitfire aircraft? Believe it or not, that's true. Friendly fire is a thing that's occurred through a lot of war. In fact, it's something that is accounted for in a lot of militaries, even up until this day. In the U.S. military, whenever an offensive operation is underway, we have an expected amount of friendly fire incidents and casualties that we're already accounting for, because those things are inevitable. However, you measure how successful a military is in terms of their training and their professionalism based off of the mitigation of friendly fire casualties and how effective that can actually be. And so if you look at the example of the Spitfire, which became one of the best fighter aircraft of the Second World War by far, it still started off with a rocky story. And that's one thing to always remember, is that unfortunate incidents will always happen. You can, of course, as one guy said, I forgot what his name was, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's fairly true. And you always have to account for that. It's just a question of how much can you stop wrong things from happening that can go wrong and will go wrong. How many times can you make it not happen? Anyways, moving on from that stall, I see that the slow mode is on. So with that, let's get back into those questions.
All right. So first up, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream, CFA, WF2U, Mark Hodges, and JP's RCs. That says the Morse code says, hopefully the new vehicles will change the course of the war.
And hopefully they will. I think that they will all change the course of the war. Matthew is not really a big Bradley believer, but I'm a Bradley believer. I think that that thing, beyond anything else right now, will be changing the course of the war as far as the front line is being fought. We know that the Ukrainians have now mastered the realm of artillery in terms of its accuracy and its competence. Let's see. Also, Matthew, I will do that in the future. But moving beyond that, One thing that we do know is that the infantry on the front line are already being supported by artillery that's incredibly competent and capable, but we do not see their infantry largely improving in terms of their own firepower and their own support. The best we've ever seen is that they've gotten an MTLB replacement in terms of the MRAPs, the armored cars, and also the MTLBs, the M113s, replacing those. But we haven't seen the firepower in their ability get increased, and we're finally seeing that with the Marder 1s and the Bradleys. We're also seeing that infantry support will probably become a little bit better with the AMX 10RC, considering it's a highly mobile gun platform, very similar to a light tank. And finally, if the Leopard 2s get introduced, we'll be seeing the Ukrainian tank forces becoming a lot more competent here in the next coming days or weeks. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And wasn't that the Morse code?
Yeah, it is. That was actually the Morse code. I took that as a question.
So moving on to our first question. This first one is going to be from Newt Ramin, who says, have you and the enforcers seen the video of international forces, the man telling his family he's still alive? I personally haven't seen that one.
I have not seen that one, but I'll see if I can try and find it somewhere and take a look at it. But with that, we are on to the next one. And also, we just raised $6,000. We're now at $1,000 over goal. Dang. Unbelievable.
Nice.
Can we get to 20? I'm just kidding. Can we get to 7.5 though? Like, I feel like that's actually realistic. I wonder if we will reach 7.5 by the end of the night. But with that, let's get to the second question.
All right. And the second question goes to Miller, who says, why doesn't the United Nations put peacekeepers on the Ukraine and Belarus border?
That's a good question. Most likely because that would be considered bringing in, because one thing you have to remember is that United Nations peacekeepers are not United Nations peacekeepers. That kind of sounds a little weird, but let me explain. The United Nations does not have a standing military or any kind of military force on their own. They also do not have the funds individually to raise those kinds of forces. However, they can call upon United Nations members from around the world and pay those forces to do their bidding. That's why you see UN peacekeepers of varying degrees of competence. And this is the reason why you'll see this. And let me pull this up. So, images. So you'll notice right here that in this picture, these UN peacekeepers are wearing M1 steel helmets, which the United States phased out of service around the late 70s and early 80s. And you can also see that these guys are from Nepal. And one thing that we know about Nepal is that due to a lot of I guess you could say, tumult inside of their country, their government isn't really strong enough to train soldiers all too well to their own standard. And so these would be considered lower quality UN peacekeepers, if you want to call them that. But in this picture right here, you can actually see Chinese peacekeepers with a lot more modern equipment and better protective armor. I mean, like, these guys look like they're just lacking body armor in general, and if anything, they have on a flak vest. These guys look like they're wearing proper plates, but once again, it's China, so I'm sure it's like Wish.com cardboard. But moving on from that, and explaining why there's a huge difference here, and also showing this, the UN uses countries and pays their militaries to do their job, what they're supposed to be doing. So if you send in UN peacekeepers, they wouldn't be United Nations peacekeepers. The Russians would view them as, let's just say, Polish peacekeepers, German peacekeepers, British peacekeepers, American peacekeepers. And not only that, the idea of sending in peacekeepers has to be approved by the United Nations Security Council. And now we're going to go through United Nations politics real quickly, because the UN Security Council is the one that goes and approves all decisions. And there are only 5 members of the UN Security Council. And those members are, and let me make sure I'm correct in this, China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So going over that, there are 5 permanent members, and these 5 members all have to vote in agreement on one thing for UN peacekeepers of any quality, whether they be higher quality UN peacekeepers or lower quality UN peacekeepers, to be sent into a country. And only
No, I thought that UN peacekeepers were just sent into countries where the conflict is pretty much ended, and they're trying to at least facilitate their transition to peace. I didn't know they were like actually sent into active war zones.
Usually they are sent into active war zones, mostly in lower developed countries like in Central Africa and also South America, to generally try and protect civilian populations. But there's always a lot of questionability there because the UN rules of engagement are so strict. UN peacekeepers really can't do anything unless if they're directly fired on. So they could sit there and just watch war crimes being committed in front of them, people committing heinous acts against women, killing whole families, and they can't do anything unless if a bullet comes flying right over their heads. Then they can do something about it, but until then they can't. So there's also a lot of question about, are UN peacekeepers really worthwhile, because they can't really do anything due to the rules of engagement. But moving back on into the Security Council, all 5 members, the permanent members, have to vote in agreement on something for it to happen, and only one member has to veto a decision for it to not happen. And so if the Security Council had it brought before them, let's send peacekeepers in Ukraine, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and China would all probably vote yes, send peacekeepers into Ukraine. Russia would veto it, and the UN can't do anything. They are completely stuck in deadlock because of Russia. Now, then that brings up the idea, well, kick Russia off the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. You can't. There is no way to remove a permanent member of the UN Security Council according to the United Nations Charter. They are there forever, and you can never get rid of them. So until the end of time, Russia can veto anything and everything that the UN Security Council wants to do if it's against their interests, and there's absolutely nothing anyone can do about it according to how the UN Charter is laid out, and they'll just keep doing what they want, and there will never be UN peacekeepers in Ukraine for that reason.
They just dissolve the entire council itself and reinstitute it?
I don't think they can, because that would also require a unanimous vote by the Security Council, and if Russia vetoes it officially, the UN still exists, and the UN Security Council would still exist. Everything at the end of the day will always go back to the Security Council and a unanimous vote on their end, and therein lies the problem, because there will never be a unanimous vote on anything that's against Russia's interests, because Russia can just veto it, and it will never happen.
Well, that was a really bad setup then, to let Russia be the permanent member and just let it be basically stuck that way.
Well, here's the reality of why that happened. Because you see, it wasn't really supposed to happen that way, but the Russians said, you know, if y'all do it off of a majority rules kind of mindset, you know, and this was back during the Soviet times, the Soviet Union said, if y'all do this off of a majority rules mindset, this board is already stacked against us, because with the United States, the United Kingdom, and France on board, which all are generally in the same group and vote in the same ways, we're going to get roughshotted on everything, and we won't ever achieve anything we want at all. And so they said, we're not going to join the United Nations. And so then an agreement was made so that way all the major countries in the world could be part of a single unitary organization and bring things to the diplomatic table through the United Nations, that they would make it to where one veto could overturn the entire decision. That was the only way that they could get the Soviet Union to agree to become a member of the United Nations and the Security Council as well. And it was in an idea that it would somehow ensure world peace a little bit better if they were on it. So that's why there is the one veto rule, and also why the Soviet Union is a permanent member. Well, Soviet Union and further on the Russian Federation.
But in reality, though, what in reality can the Security Council actually do to change anything? Is it just like one of those meaningless councils, or do they actually have power to change something?
They do have power to do some things. Like, for example, I said example twice right there. When the Somali pirate situation was becoming a little bit severe and piracy was becoming very rampant in that area of the Indian Ocean, the United Nations Security Council did make a unanimous agreement to begin anti-piracy operations, and you would see the United States, the United Kingdom, Russia, France, China, and almost every other country in the world join in the anti-piracy operations off the coast of Somalia during that time. There are things they can do, but generally, if any of the decisions that the Security Council has brought before them involves one of these countries and it's against their own interests, they'll just veto it. But if it's, for example, in the middle of Africa, like South Sudan, and there's a terrible civil war going on there's nearly 2 million dead, and you send in UN peacekeepers to try and protect the civilians, that is something that they all generally will unanimously vote and agree on, but beyond that, they don't really get to do much.
Yeah, it seems like the UN just goes places that basically they know they can push over, like the powers that be in an area. They don't really go anywhere that's a serious situation like that. I doubt they would ever go to Ukraine or Russia, ever.
And I think they probably wouldn't, and that's also something I always find funny because there's a group of people here in the United States that always go, oh my God, the UN peacekeepers are coming here. The U.S. would just veto that, they would just be like, no, like we did back during Hurricane Katrina. Let's send in UN peacekeepers to New Orleans. And then the U.S. just went, no, and it just didn't happen. That's really what all of these people can do on the Security Council. And I've seen a couple of interesting points brought up too on this, and this is a pretty big deal. One of the first ones was use Swiss troops. You wouldn't believe it, but Switzerland was not a member of the United Nations until the 1980s, I believe. So they were like one of the last people to join the United Nations out of everyone. Let me check that. When did Switzerland join the UN? Oh my God, I was wrong. It was actually 2002 when they joined the United Nations. So that's very recent. That's literally just within the last 21 years, Switzerland became a member of the UN. And even then, they generally abstain in every single vote. They don't really pick a side. Going on from that, another idea that was brought up is, let's see. Can the General Assembly override the Security Council? They cannot. The Security Council is the supreme decision-making body of the United Nations. The General Assembly just gets together and talks about things, but the real action is done through the Security Council. So you can't really do anything as the General Assembly trying to overrule the Security Council, because the General Assembly's authority is derived from the Security Council and their final decisions. So, in a way, you can't. And now everyone's saying the UN has been useless. But yeah, it's generally, really, to be honest with y'all, the United Nations is a fairly useless organization in most aspects. Because considering that all of the major countries in the world are on the permanent council list, there's really nothing you can do in pertinence to anything large or important to the entire world, because they can just veto it and still keep doing what they want. It's just, it only really affects minor countries in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia that really don't have a say in anything, and anyone can come in and do anything they want. So, with that, I hope that addresses the whole UN thing fairly well. And let's get on into, I think, the last question. And this has been a really long question segment, by the way. Like, it's been long.
And yes, this will be the last question of the first segment. And this one goes to Damien Baloo, who says, do you think Putin could use Belarus to send a nuclear weapon, since the replica would be on Belarusian territory and not in Russia?
Could the Russians use Belarus to send a nuclear weapon?
Yes.
They could, but that would incur a lot of things. One, that incurs the Belarusians are getting directly involved in the war, and not only that, they're using a nuclear weapon, which also implies that they have been lying to the entire world. They've been breaking multiple treaties about nuclear armaments and who can have nuclear weapons, and that would make the Belarusians seem as though they're in violation of international treaties, which would also become a very serious issue that would pretty much require any nuclear power in the world. It would probably also include the Chinese to come in and stomp out the Belarusians, because they would be going against treaties that would also violate potentially their future security. Another thing that could come out of that is that the Ukrainians start to fight Belarus. Well, moving on from that, if a weapon of any kind of a nuclear origin is used in Ukraine, it begins World War III. That's been made very clear. So not only would the Ukrainians be going to war with Belarus, but the entire Western world would end up going to war with Belarus. And funnily enough, they border more of NATO than Russia does at this point. So I feel like that would be a bad idea on their end for the Russians and the Belarusians to do, so I feel like it's highly unlikely, but it is possible. It can happen. So with that, I hope that does answer that final question fairly well, and now it's time for us to get back into the news here in the Northeastern Front, where we saw a partisan set up a improvised explosive and blow up a railway.
Железная дорога. Время пошло.
Got the clock and everything.
За своду Луганsk.
And that's the end of the video, but of course, simple explanation of what will happen after this video. The little explosive under the railroad track explodes, it breaks the railroad track, a repair crew has to come down, close the line, and then repair the affected section of rail, which could take over the course of a day or two. So it is affecting Russian supplies, at least in the short term. Moving on into the next bit of news, a little bit further down the line near Svatove, we also saw a Ukrainian Mi-8 firing off its rockets into the distance near Russian forces. See the helicopter flying over the slightly snowy fields. What's kind of interesting about this Mi-8, and I haven't really seen this before, is that there is an NSV sticking out of the front of the helicopter. That is very rare. We actually haven't seen anything like that so far in this war. So this, I don't know what variant of the Mi-8 this is, but that's still really interesting.
Are these the guys that get like lead poisoning from sitting in this area?
Nah. You have to have some really bad ventilation, also some pretty heavy weapons on a helicopter or an airplane to get like lead poisoning and other kinds of stuff inside of it. Like the only thing I can think of that you can really get that in easily is an AC-130 gunship. But shooting a machine gun like this, wouldn't be any big deal. You now see the firing the rockets, popping the flares. We can see that in the mirror up here, and they're now banking back down towards the ground and getting out of there. And that's the end of the video, but once again, an interesting look at a very rare variant of the Mi-8 we haven't seen much, firing off rockets towards the Russians. With that, we're now moving on into the next bit of news, a little bit further south of Svatove, where we saw the Ukrainian Special Forces doing what they do. Uh-oh, this post was deleted.
Uh-oh.
I would have to say, I kind of understand why it was deleted, but I was wanting to show it to y'all anyways. And also, interestingly enough, Matthew, last night's stream got age restricted, and YouTube didn't really explain why. So I sent them a request to review it, and it's currently in the process of review, I believe. But that was kind of interesting, because they didn't specify what it was. They usually do. So let me check my other email real quick, and let me see if they've given me a response.
I have a feeling I know what it was, but I won't say until we know for certain.
I don't. Well, actually, they just gave me a response literally 5 minutes ago and said that it still is in violation of their age restriction guidelines. So I don't understand why. But anyways, if y'all want to see it, y'all have to say yes. I'm 18 years old. And someone in the comment section also, just to say this real quick, someone said I put in my credit card information and still couldn't access the age-restricted video. As far as I remember, last time I watched an age-restricted video on YouTube, you don't have to enter your credit card information. So if it asks you for that, don't give it, because I don't think that's normal. That would be really weird. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on down from the Svatove area and on into Kremenna. And I have to point this out about the Kremenna area here on Deep State UA. If you notice, once again, Dubrova has been abandoned, which was the last foothold they had. And if you look at the road from Dubrova to Kremenna, which should be about right here, you can see that the only last bit of houses and buildings that could actually be used as an anchor point for a defense are now not even occupied by the Russians. They're in the middle of no man's land right now, and the next buildings that the Russians have to defend out of are in Kremenna itself. So now the Ukrainians have an open road, pretty much. They have to clear out the forests, of course, leading up to Kremenna, but they have an open road to Kremenna itself, and the fighting will probably begin there soon. With that, we're going to be moving out of the Oh, actually, I didn't show you all the clip. Here's the pictures. And you can see right here an M113 moving through the mud. We can also see in another picture the M113's turret. This is an Australian version of the M113 called an M113 AS4. Really cool looking. I like the addition of a turret on top. It just makes it look neater. And I gotta say, that may be my favorite version of the M113 yet, with a little turret on top of it. But with that...
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, but with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news, which is nowhere but in Bakhmut. And of course, you're going to see the bulk of our news is in Bakhmut. So strap in, everyone. We're going to be going over each front one at a time. Well, each part of the battlefield one at a time. Starting off with the northern front, where most of the activity is occurring and most of the offensive operations by the Russians are undergoing right now. Starting off with our first clip, we saw that some Ukrainian soldiers were having a dance party in this area today. Also, I cannot play the music. It is a dance party, but we cannot have that much fun around here. Wait a minute, they're doing the Chadwalk thing. You know that meme thing that went around for a bit?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now see this guy doing the floss. See this guy getting a good laugh out of it. And I see these folks dancing near their car. Pretty good dance skills from both of them. I cannot dance.
I don't know what kind of dance that is, but it's pretty decent.
Yeah, I don't know what it was either. I can't even dance. When you see this guy doing a little shimmy over his ATGM. Just imagine a Russian seeing this guy dancing in the train line. They're like, huh, I guess we're not doing that well because I don't feel like dancing. And that's the end of the video, but still very nice to see that everyone is dancing. And so is that. We're moving on into the next bit of news in the Soledar area, where we saw a Ukrainian tank in Soledar proper, the town itself, being used for infantry support. Also, we can confirm in this footage that the Ukrainians still control the salt mine in the town, which is in the dead center. This is against even the Deep State UA map, which claims, right now, and this is why I don't know why people used to give me flack about using this map only, because at the end of the day, no map's accurate. This map right here does not account for the salt mine. The salt mine's somewhere around right here, and they're saying that the Russians control the salt mine practically, but from what we can tell, the Ukrainians control the salt mine and a decent amount of ground around it, almost leading all the way down to about right here. But Deep State UA has not adjusted for that information, and it's showing that no map can be accurate. I'm not going to knock Deep State UA for their map being inaccurate in this case, because my map is inaccurate in many cases, but it shows that the fog of war is something that you cannot always get perfectly accurate. That's why it's called the fog of war. No one really knows where the front line is exactly. We try and piece it together, everyone does, the best they can, but about every other map, as long as you're getting the general area of where the front line is as accurate as the next. But anyways, moving on from that, we can see this Ukrainian tank blasting away some Russians near the salt mine earlier today. We can see the Ukrainian tank firing into one of the buildings and moving forward. We can also see something burning falling out of one of the buildings connected to the salt mine. We can now see the tank firing again. And with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, fairly interesting to see that this tank is fighting right under the salt mine. Still coming by the Ukrainians. Also, Mighty Root said Deep State isn't real time. If based off of what we're getting on this channel, the map should have been updated today, because the actions we're talking about that have retaken the salt mine and a decent amount of ground around it occurred the day before. So the map should be adjusted by now, but it isn't. You know, still though, I'm not saying that Deep State UA is wholly inaccurate. Don't count on it, because we're still counting on it. But every once in a while, it seems as though everyone does miss a thing here and there on what these front lines look like. But with that, we're going to be moving on to the next bit of news in the Soledar area, where we also saw a Ukrainian soldier fighting in Soledar.
Понасыпай!
See him whipping out the gat. Or I guess you could call it the kazoo. Now see him firing it into a house, getting back into his house. Now see him reloading the RPG. And so with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, fairly interesting to see that the Ukrainians are fighting in Soledar, and it looks like they're doing a fairly good job. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the next clip of news, once again further south of Soledar, where we saw some Ukrainian troops storming a Russian position, and doing quite a good job. We saw this all on drone. Once again, we got to get that epic music playing, because no video in this war, either by the Russians or the Ukrainians, is complete without some epic soundtrack. Well, you can see right here, Ukrainian soldier interviewing. We can see a guy who is literally kitted to the nutsack walking behind him. He has an AK, an RPG, probably some kind of a light tank in the bag, and also some very good body armor. We can now see right here that it says it has a Kadas Granata, which probably means something like a grenade. We can now see them firing RPGs at the Russian positions as they are assaulting them. We can also see the epic patch. And let's see if we can read this a little bit better. Right here we have the Poraneni occupant. So this must be the occupant. And we also have the Shitormovi Grili. Gruli. So unfortunately, I don't know what that means in Ukrainian or Russian, but it appears we have some guys here. I'm assuming that the red ones are not the good ones. Also,
notice
wow.
the MRAP in the background looking
Yeah.
all nice.
Man, every time the Ukrainians get a new vehicle, someone in some garage, like a Ukrainian walks up, "Hey, Tony, got a new one here." And he's like playing Pimp My Ride as he like spray paints the Ukrainian digital camo and everything. Like, whoever's doing the job with the camo is doing a really good job. I'm assuming that we're seeing the Ukrainians down here, and the Russians are up top. You see a grenade getting thrown into the dugout and exploding. So we are watching the Ukrainians because they are assaulting in the film. But let me make sure. Let me go back and read this caption accurately. Ukrainian airborne troops storming Russian position. So yes, we are watching the Ukrainian airborne right here. Now see the Russians firing back from their trenches. Now we're getting another take, a quick interview with a Ukrainian soldier near the Max Pro again, dripped out. And with that, that's the end of the video. But you really got to give it to those Ukrainian airborne troops. They got right up on those Russian forces, lobbing grenades right into their emplacements, their trenches, and storming the positions, literally storming them. And you have to give them a lot of credit for that because that takes a lot of bravery and also a lot of skill. With that, we're going to be moving on into the next bit of news, way behind Soledar, in the rear line, where we saw some Ukrainian 105mm artillery firing at the Russians, and this is the venerable British M119 howitzer. A lighter mortar, not as strong as the M777 in terms of caliber or explosive mass, but still quite the artillery piece. And they're getting quite a rate of fire out of this thing, goodness. And so with that, that's the end of the video. And
Nice.
I just saw someone, Matthew, say the M777 is British. Why don't they use it then? Just like, I know it's British design, but it's not really British if they're not using it. I don't care. Like, at the end of the day, I try and give the British credit every single time we talk about that gun, but it's still American pretty much. If you design something and then you never use it and someone else uses it, it's theirs at that point. It's kind of like how Henry Ford is known as the guy about the automobile, but he wasn't the one who invented it. He was just the one who made a load of them. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from this little clip and on into the next one further down in the Krasnohora area, where we saw an update on Soledar and Bakhmut from the guy of Bakhmut.
Щодо вчорашньої істерії із містом Соледар, з Бахмутом, ці айпсошники, які розганяли інформацію, що все пропало, все захватили, нікого не слухайте. Ці міста знаходяться під контролем Збройних сил. Ми потримаємо, скільки потрібно. Є наказ, і всі війська, які знаходяться тут, на Донеччині, на Луганщині, розуміють чітко, що вони роблять. Як би там тяжко чи не тяжко було, все буде, наказ головнокомандуючого буде виконаний.
And so with that, that's the end of the video. And once again, pretty interesting to see that he is saying, unlike yesterday where they were saying it was a difficult position, now they're saying that they're holding Soledar and Bakhmut. And that is true from what we've been able to tell. They are holding both of them down today, and the Russians have not been able to move forward at all. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one. And also, I just saw this, and this has got to be a quick rabbit hole because this is something I actually know about. Someone said Henry Ford invented mass production. Not true, actually. It's actually a really interesting combination of two industries, but he was smart enough to combine them into one. He went to a cannery, well, I guess you could say a butchery that was also a cannery, and he saw how efficient the production lines were in that cannery on how they would cut up these carcasses so quickly into meat, and then also create the canned products in a single continuous line where each person on the line had a single job that they repeated over and over again. And he thought, wow, this is super efficient. What if we took this idea and scaled it up and also made it to where you produced automobiles that way? I wonder if it will work. And then he did it, and it worked incredibly well. And he was able to make cars so cheap that really anyone could buy one. And so, you know, Ford dominated the market for a couple of years in the United States because really no one else could manufacture cars like he could and at the prices they could. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on into the center front of Bakhmut, moving into Bakhmut City, where we saw the Ukrainian forces fighting in Bakhmut today. See him firing their guns, also firing an RPG. And I also like, man, they had this guy comes walking in like he's just walking into the office, like RPGs and gunfires going on, and he's coming in like, oh boy, another day at work, man. It's a tough day.
It's time to clock out, comrade.
He's like, man, I'm off now. It's not my problem anymore. And you know, and then like like they're firing, and this guy's just walking through. And he's like yelling at the Russians, "Hey!" And they stop firing. I clocked out. And they're like, "Oh, don't shoot him. He's clocked out." And then they all just keep firing, and he's just walking through. Excuse me, everyone, just coming through. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the video. Nice once again to see the Ukrainians are really giving the Russians a run for their money in the area. With that, we're going to be moving on into the next clip, where we also saw that there's a little bit of a plight for drinking water in Bakhmut. Like many frontline cities, water access becomes very, very difficult. And of course, Matthew and me going for a week without water, Matthew and me can understand how tough it is to not have water, and how difficult it is to use water when it's not running through a tap. Also, another thing that really adds a extra level of complexity to Bakhmut is that they're not being without water for just a week. And they also don't have the availability of a grocery store around to go buy giant packs of water to have some kind of water in their houses or their apartments. They have none of that. There is no access to water as far as they are concerned unless they can find it naturally. And so people are going around to puddles in the street in Bakhmut and filling their bottles, their jugs, with puddle water, pretty much, to try and have any at all. And then, of course, we
They have a way to filter it?
I don't think they do. I think they're just getting the water straight out of the puddle and drinking it, because otherwise they would just die of thirst.
Man, this is like the perfect time to like send over those life straw things that they don't require any energy or anything.
You know, Matthew, I knew as soon as I brought up this topic on the news that this would be something you would say, because I was like, man, Matthew would be like talking about that life straw right now. And I would agree. I think the life straw would be something that should be found and sent over. Maybe our guys at NAFO could do something about that, because I know they're really big into vehicles, but life straws are fairly cheap, especially, you know, in for the number you can get versus a singular car. And it would probably mean a lot to help out these people in Bakhmut. They could use these life straws to actually drink clean water, so that way they don't have a chance of getting dysentery or some kind of a bad ailment from bad water that they're finding wherever they can. You can see them right there.
And I assume they're boiling it, by the way. I see everybody saying they're boiling it. And yeah, they probably are, but that's time consuming. The life straw would make it a lot quicker if they had it.
And also, here comes a lot of other questions, like, where are they getting the fuel to boil the water? Do they have fuel to boil the water? Are they without
Firewood.
fuel? Well, yeah, but I mean, like, what if they can't find firewood? What if there's only a small amount of twigs and the fire is so small and can't burn hot enough that they can't really boil water at all? They can just kind of get it a little warm. There's a lot of questions that get involved there, and it would just be better for them to be able to find purified water instead of trying to have to find a way to somehow not only collect water but then boil it as well. Yeah, and also people are starting to give ideas of how to filter it, and this is with the condition that you can find charcoal and sand. Like, what if the only place to find bakhmut is sand? And let's look around that city for a minute, because sand may be a little bit hard to find. Most of the areas you can see in Bakhmut where there would be sand are right now currently on the front line. For example, this little large area down here, that kind of looks like sand. In this area up here on the chicken tender, there's sand, but that's literally just 200 meters away from the front line right now. So there really is no way for them to get sand. There may be no way for them to get charcoal. So it might be better to either send them pre-made filters that we know work and can filter hundreds, if not thousands of gallons each, or to bring in purified water from elsewhere to try and help out these people to get proper drinking water, because proper...
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Proper drinking water is a very big deal. Of course, without water, life is not possible. And so it is very important to find them some kind of clean drinking water, so that way they're not catching all kinds of terrible illnesses and then probably dying from these illnesses inside of this city that they really can't leave unless if someone finds them and asks them if they want to be evacuated. If y'all don't know, if you get dysentery and you cannot get a treatment for it, you literally crap yourself to death. You just crap to the point you're dehydrated and keep crapping until pretty much you're devoid of any fluid in your body, and then you just collapse and die. From what people have accounted for in the First World War, when people still died of dysentery every once in a while, it was by far one of the most feared and worst ways to die, according to soldiers in that war, because it was a slow, very painful death, and it was also just very gross, both for the person who had dysentery and for everyone else around them. So I think it would be very important to send over something to help them out with that. But what were you about to say, Matthew?
I was about to say, Ronald Schmidt asked to see what a life straw looked like, and you got to show him.
Yeah, let's show them a life straw. So this is a life straw right here. And Matthew could probably give you a better sales pitch on this thing than me, because Matthew actually has one. So would you like to tell them a little bit about your life straw?
Yeah, it's basically just like a tube full of really, really fine fibers that filters the water, and you literally just put it in the water and drink through it like a straw. So it's pretty cheap, and it says $19.95 right there, but that's like the retail price. If they're selling it for charity purposes, I think it's much cheaper than that. That is a ingenious device right there that could be really useful over there. And it looks like they have a larger version of it too. I didn't know about.
Yeah, and also look at that. They actually have a thermos looking kind of bottle where you could put the water inside of it and carry it on the go, and then it filters the water as you drink it, which is also really nice.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I didn't know about that either.
Yeah, and they also have like a gravity bag. Look, they're letting the dog drink out of it in that thing.
Dogs can drink any water. You don't have to filter their water.
Well, I mean, like, I wouldn't want my little baby corgis, drinking nasty water. I'd probably find good water for them, but I mean, like, yeah, you could really take any of these products and send them to Ukraine, and I'm sure they would work fairly well, like this Life Straw community. I mean, how
many gallons does one last? Like, click on the thing and see like how many gallons it can go for.
So let's go back to the straw, let's go to the singular unit, and let's see what it's got. So protects against bacteria. Learn more. So. It can
1,000 gallons.
Up to 1,000 gallons of water. So that is enough to last an individual 5 years, or long enough that the Battle of Bakhmut would have ended by then. So yeah, I think that would definitely be a good product to send over. But what about the Life Straw community? Because that may be the most economical version of the Life Straw system that could be used. So let's see.
Dang, enough for 75 people for 3 to 5 years. That's crazy. 26,000 gallons.
Dang,
that's nuts. Only for $3.95? That's like a steal.
That might actually be something that should be sent to Bakhmut, is a bunch of Life Straw communities, and just set them up in basements where people know where they are, and just fill them with the puddle water, and then it gets filtered, so that way they do have clean drinking water. I think this would be a lot easier, just spending a couple of $1,000s for several dozen of these things and placing them around the city, instead of, having these people try and boil the water and find the fuel to boil them, or they don't have the fuel to boil them, and then they have to drink the stuff and get some kind of sick illnesses. Also, some people said that dead bodies are lying all around, which is also true. They're rotting. Their filth and germs and such that is festering inside of these corpses are now entering some of the water supply, and that also makes it a lot more rancid, and you can get typhoid that way and also die a completely different way. So I think that it would be much better as a concept to bring in water filtration systems like this instead of coming up with something like boiling it, because
And Casey Johnson said, "So you suck the water out of the straw and spit it into your cooking pot?" Well, that's what the community pot right here would probably be better for, so you don't have to do that. But yeah, you have a point.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good. Anyways, I hope we've gone over that fairly well about this. But once again, getting back into the seriousness of the issue and getting past a couple of the jokes and funny things we've been saying, this is a serious issue, and hopefully some fix or solution can be found to it. With that, we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news from Bakhmut, a little bit further behind the line, where we've got some more pictures of the area of Bakhmut and what it's looking like now. Here we can see a T-72B, or a T-72BV that has been outfitted with ERA tiles that is taking a break in Bakhmut. We can see one of those puddles behind it. In the next picture, we can see people going to the local river for water, which, if I remember correctly, there's only one river, and it's right here. So they are very close to the front line. I mean, the front line's like right here. They're just right here getting the water. Yikes, that's close. It's putting them in a lot of danger to even try and get that water, and once again, not filtered. And this is stagnant water, and stagnant water is the filthiest water you can try and find and drink. It's probably got more germs and more diseases in it than anything. Moving on to the next bit, you can see, once again, more burning buildings in Bakhmut, as it appears that a volunteer is driving through. And in the final picture, we can once again see another puddle that's probably being used for drinking water, and a bunch of destroyed buildings around it. And I gotta tell you, by that water's weird blue color, there is something bad wrong with that water.
Ooh. Yeah, some chemical's been in it.
Yeah, some kind of terrible chemicals have been in it, and you also got this giant rusting beam in there too, which is adding to the additional flavor. And that's why I'm saying that you don't really want to have someone trying to boil this stuff, because I don't know if boiling it would get everything out of this. You may just want to get the filters, like the life filters, and just see if they work. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on out of the Bakhmut area. Also, we're not trying to see if they work. We know they work because Matthew has one, and we've tried it, and it does work. But anyways, moving on from the center part of the line and further on south into the area of Klishkivka, we also saw that the Ukrainians were able to shoot down a Russian Lancet in this area.
Таку хуйню збиває, блядь. Отак. Називається ланцет. Підарас. Отак. А о Петруха любується.
Also, Matthew, I like how that guy at the end right there, once he got done taking a picture, he put down the tail section really carefully so that way he didn't damage anything. It's like, it's literally just a ripped off piece of tail section from an already destroyed drone. And look how gently he sets it down. He's like, I want to be very careful with it, not hurt it. Don't want to damage it or anything.
А ну я там сяду, а ти не відключай, знімай просто.
Nope. Alright, we had a little freeze there in the video.
Наступний, хто?
Давай я.
Не надо мене фоткати. Я не публічний. Вот такая вот поеботина. Да. Вот, шик. И сработали. Четко.
And so with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, need to see they shot down another Lancet. But beyond that, the southern front of the front line, the southern flank of the front line has been completely quiet. There's really been nothing going on down here. I don't think anything will be going on. With that, we're going to be moving a little bit behind the lines to the area of Konstantinivka, where we saw some Ukrainian children on the side of the road laughing and holding a Ukrainian flag. Looks like they're getting a blast out of this, and I can't really blame them. And also, just a really neat little picture to see. So we'll sit here for a second so that we all can see it. And now, we are going to be moving on into the next bit of news. Out of the Bakhmut area, and into the Donetsk area. I don't know why, Matthew, I had to stutter right there, but it sounded like I was getting poked by a needle. I sat there and went, oh! But anyways,
Goodness.
Moving on down into Andriivka, we saw some low-flying Ukrainian Su-25s providing air support. Here's the video. Here went one, here goes the other. Are you kidding me? The video. There it goes. And that's the end of the video. But once again, hopefully those Ukrainian Su-25s will continue to rock the Russians with their firepower and continue to stay flying, hopefully not shot down. With that, we're going to be moving on into the next bit of location on, well, Donetsk news, where we can see in the area of Marinka, once again, I've had a lack of coffee, we can see that artillery landed nearby while someone was in a basement. Well, while a soldier was in a basement.
Скажи, той набік виворачує. Що, тяжко?
Ебать, сука, заебал. Живи! Сюда, блиндаж! Живи! Да, Денис! Сюда, блядь! Залазь! Контузил?
Ні.
Залізь сюди чуть-чуть ближче.
Ні.
А тебе?
Де в'їбало?
Я все закрив, я очі, рот закрив, мене аж, блядь, в голові так почало пищати. Я
Де в'їбало, хлопці?
Тут десь біля пулемета.
And so with that, that's the end of the video. And also, Matthew, I like how that guy said, no rain in winter, doofus, yet there's puddles of water everywhere.
Yeah, it can rain any time of the year. So
Yeah.
it's not like you can't rain during the winter. It's not a rule.
I'm going to run outside next time it rains here in January. I'm going to yell, hey, it's not supposed to be raining, idiots.
Yeah, it's going to be like, I'm going to go outside and sue the weather. It's not supposed to be raining in winter.
Oh, man. You know, what would be funny is if I did that, you know, I go running out in a rainstorm. Hey, it's not supposed to rain in winter, doofus. And then I get struck by lightning. Anyways, we're going to be moving on into the next clip. I got to say, though, this guy was jumpy a little bit. He may be getting his nerves a little bit frayed from being shelled so much. But you got to give him a lot of credit for being around on the front lines long enough that he is having a little bit of shell shock, I guess you could say. But hopefully he can get through just fine and keep on going on. But you got to give him a lot of credit. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on out of the Donetsk area, as there is no frontline activity here today. Just the normal fighting, and the front lines are not changing. And so we're now going to be moving down into the area of Polohi, where we of course saw.
Are you soldier compaling?
Compalining. He's been compalining. And so here was the Russian soldier compalining.
Пологи. Бина бегелек. Жизнь кипит. Атақтаңа продуктов нагелдебиз. Этестер килер баалла. Аяк киһи бар. Jamma khan sallari. Oh, Nikita. Maqtal den restoranda, Nikita.
That's a nice restaurant.
Maqtal restoranda. Ayu, блядь, чай делит бит. Кофе лахтар ревит я. Кофе да ишти. Сүйөнлөр бит. Ле баннага сүйөнлөр. Бии окупандар курдук көрөлөр бит я буна. Здесь. Бул валатта. Полный боевой ресторан. Да, это же ресторан. Кофе был просто, блядь, кофе.
So pretty much what this guy was saying, he was completely shocked that people that they're invading are not really treating them well. And I gotta give it to him, man. Like, the people working in this little restaurant, they got some balls to treat people with guns terribly, apparently. Like, he's like, they're rude, very, very rude to us. They've got guns, and these people are like, yo,
These are the Russians going through the rrestaurant?
Yeah, these are Russian soldiers in this restaurant. They're sitting there talking about, you know, these people, they treat us terribly. They view us as invaders. Unbelievable. Like it's not, like it's just uncalled for. Oh, how dare they treat us like invaders? We ought to be treated like good friends or something.
The Russians are the type of guys to go into a restaurant of a place they're occupying and leave a bad Yelp review.
Drake, the kind of guy. Anyways, yeah, they are. I mean, these guys are the kind of people to sit there and punch you in the mouth or rear end your car and then get out and act like you shouldn't be mad at them or beating the hell out of them. Gee, why are you getting in a fight with me? All I did was punch you in the mouth, man. It's no big deal. Like, that's how stupid they are. Anyways, we're going to be moving on from this and on into the next bit, because further down the line, We saw, y'all remember back in the war, back when Kadyrov was around and everything, he would say, Akhmat is power. And, and then the perfume and cologne guy would go, strength, power, out there in, like, the crowd. So, apparently, I didn't understand this the whole entire time, but apparently the Akhmat was an armored car. And I didn't know that. And I'll show y'all a picture of one here, because these are the scary Chechen cars. Scary Chechen armored cars that they were using. And you may remember, Matthew, that some of these were pictured around Kadyrov's palace when they were trying to make it seem like they were still in Ukraine, although they would almost all return back to Chechnya. But these were in the pictures. And interestingly enough, one of them was actually partially destroyed and captured today in the area of Vasilivka, and there's a video of it.
I would like to see this video.
Yes, because Akhmat is powered on. And they also covered it in some stupid net done. But we can see that they tried to strip the tires off of their own vehicle done and put the concrete slab on the side done.
How'd they even pick that up to put it there?
Dude, there was some guy whose knees were absolutely buckling, like shaking and stuff as he was picking it up, and he was going, and then Ham and Cheddar Man was behind him going, pick it up, Donna. Akhmat is power, Donna.
Pick it up like your life depends on it.
Pick it up, or the goat will not see the life of day. Oh no, not my goat! And then then he got like the power of Akhmat in him, and he just shoved it up into the air. But, anyways. Oh my god, they replaced one of the, like, tires with, like, a normal truck tire.
Tractor trailer junk.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
You know that wheel is not rated for that kind of weight. Like, that thing is about to explode. Like,
also, it can't get any traction either.
Oh my god. And then look at the back of it. Why does the back of this thing look like this was made in, like, the Wild West era? Like it's made out of a boilerplate or something.
Yeah, for a minute, I thought the front of the trunk, I thought the front of the truck looked pretty good, like in the first photo you showed me, but it looks like a piece of junk, like really from the back and the side. Jeez.
Man, I really thought this was a nice armored car, but it's really just a rat piece of shit, man. Oh, come on, Mike. No, really, man. F you, man. You're just a rat piece of shit, man. If y'all know what I'm talking about.
Mike is right this time.
Yeah, if y'all know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But Akhmat is not power. This is nothing about power. Strength. Power. This is just bull. I mean, especially when you think your armored car is so underpowered that you block an entire door on it with a giant concrete slab to try and give it a little bit of extra protection. Like, what the hell is the concrete going to do anyways? It's going to get hit and it's so brittle it's just going to shatter as soon as it gets hit and it's just going to fall apart. Like, what's the point?
I'm sure when they put it on the side of it, they were like, "Oh, comrade, they should make all armored vehicles from concrete." Oh, yes, very good idea.
Yeah, you know, after they got done doing this, Matthew, they're like, "Whew, man, I feel like finding a Russian soldier." You know, if you know what I mean. You know, you remember that?
Oh no.
Yeah, that's probably what they were like. I got to tell you, I don't really have a high admiration at all for the Kadyrovites, Chechens that are in this war. They are very sick people, and I'm saying that, and y'all haven't been able to see what I've been seeing. But I see videos about what they've been doing in the earlier parts of the war when they were in Ukraine a lot. And I also show Matthew one of them. And if you had seen what I had seen, it was unbelievable. It was very sick.
I didn't want to see that. Like, really, I really didn't want to see it.
Well, I thought, Matthew, because, I'm always saying to the audience, how bad things really are when you can see them on film and what it really looks like, what's happening to the Russians, what certain Russians are doing. And you just hear that like they do, and you've never really seen a lot of what I'm talking about. So I was like, you know what, on this one instance, I called Matthew into my room, and I was like, hey, check this out. You got to see it. And then I explained what it was to him and everything. But, that kind of stuff happens every day with the Kadyrovites specifically. There's Chechens on both sides, but the Kadyrovites are the sick ones. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip from Vasilivka, and we're now going to be moving on down into the area of Kherson, where we also saw that a destroyed Pantsir was found today in the fields. Also got to mute that, but we see them looking around. We can see some pieces on the ground, some Reese's pieces of missiles, and a Pantsir over there. We see the Pantsir, and you can see some of the ammunition still inside of its can. I bet you that would get a nice price in the collector's market. You see some clothes. They did a disappearing trick. And we can see the pants here has been turned into literal shreds. Not bad, I would have to say, not bad. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that.
Oh, wait a minute. Have we said it before that the Ukrainians should open up an online store and like sell like the stuff from the war to raise money?
Oh, we have. We said that like
they need to do that. Like that is something like there's got to be some civilians that can like set that up and run it while the soldiers are fighting, because that would be a humongous money raiser for Ukraine.
I think it would be. A lot of people are always in the war of souvenirs, and if they could do that, I think that that would definitely help out, especially if it was like a United 24 run thing. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 320 of the war in Ukraine. And so without further ado, here is the address.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні відбулося вперше в цьому році звільнення наших воїнів з російського полону. 50 українців повернулись додому, 33 офіцери, 17 – це рядові сержанти. Серед них захисники Київщини, Донеччини, Маріуполя, півдня країни, бійці армії, Нацгвардії, тероборони, ВМС, прикордонники. Без жодної перерви працює наша команда, щоб звільняти українців і українок. Я сьогодні їм хочу вкотре подякувати. Буданов, Єрмак, Малюк, Кусов, Лубінець та інші. Особливо дякую тим нашим підрозділам, які поповнюють обмінний фонд. Кожен, хто бере в полон ворога на нашій землі, дає можливість повернути свободу комусь з українців. Відзначу також успішність повітряних сил. Від початку цієї доби збито 3 гвинтокрила. Безпілотники також молодці хлопці. Дякую за послідовну демілітаризацію держави-агресора. Ситуація на передовій за перший тиждень року не зазнала суттєвих змін. Продовжуються важкі бої на Луганщині і Донеччині. Кожна гаряча точка на цих напрямках, вона добре відома. Бахмут тримається попри все. І хоча більша частина міста зруйнована російськими ударами, наші воїни відбивають там постійні спроби російських наступів. Соледар тримається, хоча там ще більше руйнувань і дуже тяжко. Немає такого клаптику землі біля цих 2 міст, на якому не віддав своє життя окупант за божевільні ідеї господарів російського режиму. Це одне з найбільш кривавих місць на фронті. Сьогодні командувач напрямку генерал Сирський об'їхав війська, які обороняються на підступах до Бахмута і Соледара. Він відзначив бійців нагородами за стійкість. На місці організував кроки, які необхідні для зміцнення нашої оборони. Зокрема, перекидання додаткових підрозділів і посилення вогню по окупанту. Треба розуміти, що всі наші позиції, всі наші дії в обороні взаємопов'язані. І від стійкості та ефективності дій в кожній точці фронту залежить стійкість та ефективність дій на фронті загалом. Я дякую всім нашим захисникам, захисницям, які діють саме так, які усвідомлюють, що їхня особиста стійкість, їхня особиста міцність і результативність дають стійкість, міцність, результативність всій державі. Ми обороняємо саме всю державу, де б за неї не відбувались бої. Готуємось до дипломатичних заходів, які ми запланували на цей тиждень. Очікуємо хороші новини для нашої держави, хороші рішення, які додатково посилять оборону. Світ знов побачив цими днями, що Росія бреше навіть тоді, коли сама ж своїми заявами привертає увагу до ситуації на фронті. Російський обстріл Херсона запалювальними боєприпасами одразу після Різдва, удари по Краматорську, по іншим містам Донбасу, саме по цивільним об'єктам, і саме тоді, коли в Москві звітували про нібито мовчання армії. Чергові погрози російських посадовців в Європі і світу, і все це тоді, коли в Москві щось там розповідали про нібито перемир'я. Жодна спроба Росії маніпулювати дипломатією і політикою ніколи вже не спрацює. Тільки посилення України, тільки успіхи України, тільки відновлення територіальної цілісності України, тільки повернення усіх наших людей з полону, з російською неволею є гарантіями відновлення миру. Ми наближаємо це. Слава усім, хто воює і працює заради перемоги нашої держави. Слава усім, хто допомагає нашій державі. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за нашу державу і за нашу незалежність. Слава Україні!
So with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, that is also the address from President Zelensky here on day 320 of the war in Ukraine. And also, that wraps up our little news segment. I thank you all so much once again for watching and also helping the fundraiser to get so far. We went $1.3 thousand over the goal tonight, which is still unbelievable to think that not only did we reach the goal, but of course, as usual, we blew it up and went way past it. And I got to thank you all so much once again for helping this fundraiser get so far. This is what every week equals up to be to us, is another fundraiser and more support to help out the Ukrainians. And I got to thank y'all so much once again in helping us to make this possible on like the 43rd fundraiser we've run. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into our polls, addressing all of the supporters who have helped out this fundraiser so far and helped to donate to it, and also as many questions as we can before we reach 12:30 Eastern time or 11:30 Central time, which is the time that you see at the bottom right of the screen. And so with that, let's get on into it.
And also, before I forget, Enforcer, PsyOps sent a really cool piece of art sent in by a viewer they had commissioned. So I sent it to your Discord if you haven't seen it already.
I have already seen it, actually. He sent it to me earlier, and I thought it was really, really cool. Like, it's really neat looking. But we'll of course talk that over in between you and me, Matthew. But real quick to the viewers, this is one piece of art. Take a look at that. It's art for the Kraken unit. Now, that art is so good that I would have to say, Matthew, it's unequivocally wussing.
I would say
no cap. I think we ought to see about trying to send this to the Kraken unit, because this really is something.
What if it shows them in their next video or something?
I mean, maybe.
That'd be pretty cool.
I mean, that is super cool looking, I gotta say. So let us
I don't know how they do it. Like, I'm not artistically inclined hardly at all. I have no clue how they did it. Is it like a 3D rendering or is it a painting?
It is a mix. I don't know. I really don't know what this is. Like, what kind of, like, I guess medium is supposed to be. But whatever it is, it looks sick as hell. I mean, like, there's no way you can't say that. This thing is amazing looking. And let's see. As Pancrat said, as the kid says, that's some drip.
That's some drip.
Sheesh. and then Miss said, oh, wow, that's awesome. I know. I put a lot of work in. I'm just kidding. It's not from me. But I gotta say, this thing is impressive. And I believe, if I'm correct, it's from Miles, who I think is watching the stream.
That's right.
He's watching the stream right now, isn't he?
Let me check. Ed. Maybe so. I don't know his exact username in the live chat, but I think he might be here.
But man, if he is here, I want you to know you make some impressive artwork, man. Have you ever thought about making some merch? because I think it'd be pretty good. I wouldn't want to use this as merch though, because it is like getting like right into Ukraine imagery. The Kraken unit is a huge part of Ukraine's armed forces. But one thing I would say is that, I mean, like, dang, your artistic talents, man, are unbelievable. I haven't seen anything like this. Like, this is next level. So with that, I hope everyone gives a huge shout out to Miles, because Miles is one hell of a guy for being able to come up with this kind of artwork. And if it hasn't already been sent to the Kraken unit, I'm going to see about sending it to the Kraken unit and giving you as much credit as you can and making sure that they give you a shout out somewhere, somehow for this, because I haven't seen anything like it. And I don't think the Kraken unit has either. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into the call-outs for all of the donors who've sent in support after the last time we called them out. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we have one call-out, and it goes to Jaroslav, who puts in a $50 donation. And Jaroslav, thank you very much. And we are up to $6.3 thousand on the fundraiser. Hey! And that's actually all the top donors for the moment.
What?
So,
yeehaw! 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 And so with that, let's get on into the polls, man.
All right, and for the polls, we have two of them. The first one says, is the United Nations a useless institution? A pretty bold question. 55% said yes, it is largely useless. 5% said undecided. 34% said somewhat, it has its strengths. And 6% said it's completely useless. For me, I think it has its strengths. I don't think its strength is going to be actively interfering in war zones. I think that is not a good thing, that they've been really, pretty much ineffective at. But when it comes to the humanitarian front, providing aid and things like that, I think that's where they should be most useful. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say the NATO alliance is somewhat useful in some ways. I'm going to have to be honest with you. I'm just going to be honest with y'all here. And
You mean the UN?
Yeah, the UN. Let me go back and correct that real quick. We're talking about the UN here. The UN is practically useless. I'm going to be honest here, because I always like to try and see both sides as to why it exists and why it doesn't. I don't really get the purpose of the United Nations. The United Nations can't really do anything because of its members on the Security Council. It is over-encumbered by the Charter, trying to ensure that everyone will be a member of the United Nations, and by that regard, it can't really do anything for that reason. It's just there. It just exists, but it doesn't do anything beyond that. It can't do anything, and when you even say, well, it does help out in underdeveloped countries and stopping them from committing genocides against their people, no, it doesn't. Like, genocides are committed right in front of the United Nations peacekeepers, and they can't do anything because the rules of engagement that they're subjected to. So then they're useless there. I don't really know what their purpose is. Because, you know, people say it's for diplomacy, but diplomacy, why the hell are we acting like countries can't engage in diplomatic actions on a one-to-one basis? Why in the world are we acting like this has to be intermediated by some larger third party that still isn't a larger third party? It still consists of nothing but other nations talking to each other, but using the United Nations as an intermediary. It doesn't make much sense to me. I feel like the United Nations, in that purpose, rather than just trying to make it seem like there's an international forum for diplomacy, is by and large useless. And even then, there really is no diplomacy that occurs within the United Nations. It is almost just entirely, hey, I don't like that, I'm going to call you out here in this building, and that's it. And then nothing happens from that call out. Life just goes on. I don't really see the point in it. Me personally, I think that if there should be a world security organization like that, either it has to be all-powerful and have jurisdiction over any nation in the world and be able to have a final say, or one shouldn't exist at all. And to be honest with you, I don't really like the idea of a single entity in the world having a say over anything, because there's always the ability for that thing to be corrupted and then be used against really anyone or wielded like a weapon. So it doesn't really seem to me like that would be a smart idea. So honestly, I'd say the UN is really pointless, and it's filling a gap that never even existed in the first place, in my opinion. I would be fine with seeing the United Nations slowly dismantled and nations going back to having one-on-one diplomatic negotiations and discussions with each other, or not having any at all. You know, I just honestly think there really is no purpose to the thing. But what do you think, Matthew?
I think it's just good for the humanitarian reasons.
Yeah, but I mean, like, and real quick, I will make some exceptions here. I'm talking about the United Nations on the diplomatic side of things as occurring to war. But there are some things that the United Nations does that I will say is good, like UNESCO. I think UNESCO is pretty good. It preserves World Heritage sites. Beyond that,
you know, the only catch is, besides the UN, is there any other forum that basically most of the countries in the world that have a major say actually get together and speak? Is there any other forum rather than the UN?
Yes, the G20.
Yeah, but that's only 20 countries, though.
Well, yeah, but those are the countries that matter. Like, you know, just being honest,
well, I mean,
those are the ones that matter.
Well, like the General Assembly, it gets countries from everywhere around the world together to have a say. Like that, even though, you know, some of them might have a bad say, it's the only place where everybody basically gathers together and can finally speak about stuff, or at least, you know, make their points heard, I guess you could say. But it may not result in anything meaningful, but at least they got out what they were trying to say.
But what's the point of having a say if the say doesn't mean anything? You know, that's like saying, you know, I can enter this empty room and I can shout at the wall, and it's not going to do anything, but at least there's this room where I can shout at a wall. You know, it's like, what does it really achieve?
I mean, wherever the country is, like, they can destabilize the region potentially. They might not have global implications, but for example, I don't even know which one to take for example, but like a smaller country somewhere, it could destabilize the region and lead to a larger problem if they don't have a say.
And a say in a what? I would like. Could you provide a little bit more context for me here, because I'm not really sure if I'm following.
Like, if they don't have their complaints heard, they could decide to go to war. But you know, if they show up at the UN, there could be a resolution before a war breaks out.
Well, I mean, kind of, but a lot of countries that are a part of the UN don't really have their say heard, like Venezuela. You know, it's like, oh, Venezuela's inflation is going skyrocketing, their nation's in absolute turmoil. You know, they get to the UN, they talk about it, and everyone's really just kind of like, get over it, man. And then they just get back to doing what they want to do. And I don't really think It doesn't really give smaller countries a say. And a say in what? Like the United Nations, the very few times it ever does get used and the Security Council ever unanimously does anything, it completely stomps smaller countries that do not have the economic power to be a part of the Security Council or a higher up member. Like, for example, like the United Nations can completely overlook the sovereignty of a country whenever it wants to. Like, whether you agree with it or not, like Libya, it's like Libya had a whole entire thing going on. It went to a civil war, and then the United Nations is like, you know what? We're just going to go in there and do what we want, and they did. And it's like, it's kind of weird when you think about it, because, it's like that small, the Libya, in terms of its size, it's not really small, but in terms of population and economy, it's somewhat small. There was no regard to what they wanted at all. It's just about, what do the larger countries want? We want this, so we're going to do it. And I really feel like the United Nations just ensures that smaller countries get very little say, and then they can just get screwed over on anything due to the authority of the Security Council. So in a way, I don't really think it helps out the smaller countries. I think it might be screwing them over.
I have to give credit where credit is due on this one. In the General Assembly, that's probably the only place you'll ever see like countries like North and South Korea ever in the same room. They may not be achieving anything, but at least if they wanted to, they could communicate with each other. And without the General Assembly, they would basically have to start from scratch to meet with each other, which is almost impossible considering the tensions.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I believe I may have gotten something incorrect when I was talking about Libya. I believe that was actually a NATO intervention, but I'm not really sure at the moment. Anyways, moving on from that, I don't really see that much of a purpose in the UN. I think other things like UNESCO could be organized outside of the United Nations. You could just have an international accord or an agreement about the preservation of historic structures and just create an individual standalone international organization that's job is to declare historical structures and preserve them and give them the funds to do that on their own without having to have that disseminated through the UN as a subordinate branch or office. I feel like you could do that instead, and you could really remove all of the bureaucracy and silliness and the uselessness of the actual UN General Assembly and Security Council. In my opinion, we can. Matthew may have opinions on it, of course. We're batting them around here, but what do y'all think? Because, actually, the poll was about what do y'all think. Most of y'all think it's useless, and some of y'all think it does have a point, but. At the end of the day, it still will exist, and it will never really come apart. The UN will probably be around until the end of time, unless something really crazy happens. Anyways, we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, do you think time is running out for Russia to take Bakhmut or face logistical failure? It looks like 60% said yes, Russia's time is running low. 18% said somewhat, but it depends on certain factors. 14% said no, they will keep replenishing. And 8% said unsure. Now, I think that logistics have been Russia's bane of their existence ever since they've been fighting in Ukraine. So I would say that their time is likely running low, and that's why you see Putin trying to stall for time. For example, with that fake ceasefire he tried to do that didn't work out because he lied, basically. But I would say their time's running low, so I'm going to agree with the 60%. What say you, Enforcer?
I would say I would have to agree with the 60% as well. I think the logistics are really starting to put a cap on time on what they're able to do, and that's why we've seen that it went from a front-wide action to now it's a flank-wide action, and then from there it's going to go even smaller. It's going to start going into platoon and squad-level actions on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to either the next poll or the first live chat question.
So that was our last poll. So real quick, before we move on to our questions, we have a $50 donation from Rustin Rott that we have to recognize. And Rustin Rott, we are up to $6.4 thousand thanks to that 50. So thank you very much. And that appears to be our top donor for the moment. So let's see here. I saw something in the live chat I was going to mention real quick, but I think I am either seeing things or it left the screen, one or the other. But moving on to our first live chat question from the spreadsheet, we have one from Steve Hughes, who says, who is Germany to tell other countries what they can and can't send to other countries?
Well, if the Germans' weapons are inside of that country, They are the be-all, end-all. If those countries want to continue to get German weapons and buy them from Germany, the Germans have a right to tell them how they can use them. Much like the United States puts those terms and stipulates that on any weapons we send to foreign countries. We kind of get a say in how you can use our weapons against other people. Otherwise, you won't be one of our customers anymore. And that's a big deal to a lot of countries, because if you can't get a Leopard 2, or you can't get parts to run your Leopard 2s, you have just expended a massive amount of money to get useless tanks, and you now have to find some elsewhere from another country. And then based off of you not really following the last country's request with their weapons, what guarantee is there that you wouldn't be doing things that that country would not want you to do with their weapons that you're about to be getting? So Germany does have a right to tell them if they're the ones who manufactured the weapons and sold it to them, and these people are return customers in a way. And so with that, I hope that does address the question fairly well. And of course, you know, there's a debate to be had there. I'm sure many people will be like, well, if you buy it from them, you ought to be able to use them however you want. And that's fairly true. That's a good point. But at the same time, you know, the Germans don't really want to get implicated in anything, because by using their weapons in a war on your own, they can kind of be implicated as being supporters of that action. And that's a little bit of a diplomatic fallout they might not want. Anyways, I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
I would say Germany had quite a flip in their stance on weapons, because, you know, in the beginning, weren't they like taking the stance they didn't want to send anything to Ukraine, and now they're considering sending Leopards?
Yeah, that's true. At the beginning of the war, they said, we are not getting involved in anything going on in Ukraine. And then after that, they're like, well, we can send a couple of Leopards. And then they were like, well, we can send some RSTs and some Panzerhaubitze 2000s. And then after that, they were like, we are going to send the Panzerschutzgewehre. You know, that we're going to send the.
And then after that, they're like, well, we'll send some nuclear bombs.
No, then they were like, we are going to instill support. Like, you know, they're like,
oh no,
we are going back.
Oh no,
we are going to where we are strong, in all that stuff. We're going to put $100 billion into our grand military. I mean, a very good peacekeeping operation. Anyways, I'm just kidding. And if we have German viewers, I'm just kidding. Do not take that seriously.
Oh goodness, somebody's going to get so offended about that. I can tell you right now.
Someone's about, oh, you're out. Anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right. So our next question goes to Shalmenizer, I believe, who says, didn't Poland get a herd of Abrams this year? A whole herd?
Yeah, they did. They did get a whole herd from what I know. It's just part of their acquisitions, I guess you could say. Interestingly enough, the Polish used the Abrams and the Leopards at the same time. Pretty funny, really, when you think about it, because they're complicating their logistics chain, but for some reason they want to. Don't really know why. But anyways, with that, also, Matthew, I saw a lot of people saying, I love the German accent. That's so funny. And then Marcia came in. Is that a German accent or an Indian one? And just like roasted me on the spot. But anyways, I hope that answers the question. And with that, we are on to the next one, yeah?
And the next one we have, is from Haramson, who says, I have now watched for 300 days. Thanks for your work. And what do you think is the possibility of China attacking Russia when Russia has become so weak?
China attacking the chances of China attacking Russia. Also, thank you for watching for so long. Like, that's actually pretty wild to think you've been here for 300 days. That's just insane. It's even crazier to think I've been here for 320 days. Like, I'm like whenever I think about that, Matthew, I'm like, where did the time go? It doesn't feel like it's been 320 days, honestly. It feels like we started this last week.
Yeah, it feels like we've been doing it for a while now, but it's been good days.
Well, for Matthew, I feel like for you, it must feel like a long while, because you only have to, like, there isn't a lot involved in this, at least in prep every day for you, because Matthew gets on the stream and that's when he starts working, is like during the stream when it's live. That's a lot of work though in a very short amount of time. So I bet it feels long for that reason. I have to sit here and I have to sit down at about 5:30 local time and then work pretty much all the way up until 9 o'clock to get this thing ready to go each night. So I spend so much time doing this that it almost feels like I'm never stopping doing this, even on days off. So like all the days have kind of just blended together for me, and it just has ended up being this one giant long thing that I've done from start to finish. So it doesn't even feel like it's been 320 days to me. I've lost track of time as to how long I've been doing this, but it's crazy to think that we've been doing it for so long. Some people have been watching for nearly a whole year, but still super cool to hear that you have been watching that so long. And the chances of China invading the German, not the German, the Deutschen Volk, yeah, but the Russian people, is very low, mostly because the Chinese would not want to undertake the administrative costs of administering this land and also extracting its resources. There are costs involved in that, and this area, rather than its natural resources, is incredibly poor, and so the Chinese would probably have to pump a decent amount of their own funds and money into Russia, in the Russian-controlled areas that they would now occupy, to try and make them worthwhile. Not only that, Russia is a nuclear power, and they could go into a nuclear exchange over the Chinese trying to take some of their land. So I feel like it would be highly unlikely for them to do that for those two reasons. The Chinese philosophy, and this will work more so under the Chinese strategy that they're currently implementing in Central Asia and East Africa, would be to go to Russia with a loan after this war and say, hey, we're going to help you rebuild your economy and help out your natural resources infrastructure that you're using to extract this material out of the ground with. They would make it a loan that the Russians would never be able to repay. The Russian infrastructure would be improved, however, and the Chinese would be able to get more resources at a cheaper price because of it. But then the Russians would be indebted to the Chinese because they would default on these loans. The Chinese would end up practically controlling the stuff that the Russians built off of those loans, and they would still be able to extract the resources without having to incur any administrative costs whatsoever or involve any force of arms to achieve the same effect. So I feel like they'll most likely be doing that instead. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
Do you remember that Faulty Towers episode where the Germans were at the hotel and they kept like mentioning the war to them?
Yeah, like,
don't mention the war.
Like he had the concussion and he was like, remember, Polly, whatever you do not mention the war. I mean, whatever you do, don't mention the war. And then he was like, okay, I went into the restaurant, and then he went in there and he was like, we are going to tie you up with the piano. And he's saying all kinds of crazy stuff. Man, Faulty Towers.
I love Faulty Towers. That was such a good series.
Faulty Towers was so good. I mean, like, it was just a funny show from start to finish. Like, it was hilarious. That's all I got to say about it. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Verdampt23. Who says, you guys seen the video where Zelensky was performing on the Russian New Year's show in 2013, and our favorite Russian mouthpiece, Vladimir Soloviev, is doing his dance moves to Zelensky's performance.
Yes, I have.
Don't things change?
I have seen that, and yes, don't things change a lot? You know, it's always so interesting to see this and watch it in real time. It's just wild to see. And you know, and one thing I have seen is that Zelensky has never really said any bad things of ill will to anyone but Putin. And that's something that's been fairly interesting to me because, and this is also something I think would be true in Russia with the Vladimir Soloviev guy, because if you look at him years ago, he was not saying anything even close. He was the complete opposite of what he's saying now. He's either being paid or told to say this stuff, and I'm sure he would be a lot more reserved about his comments about Zelensky if he wasn't being forced by the Russian government to say the crazy crap he's saying. But at the same time, you can't really give that guy sympathy for that, because he's a spineless guy saying crazily defamatory stuff, just straight up libel and slander every single day about the Ukrainian country and Zelensky as well, knowing that he's probably friends with him, just because he's being told to do it or being paid to do it, one or the other. But with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I have seen that, and it was also pretty funny. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Isn't it crazy how, like, one day Vladimir is, like, busting the move to Zelensky's performance, the next day he's sitting in Satan's lair running his mouth daily?
Yeah, and also...
Oh, my gosh.
Also, I think Volodymyr Soloviev was there, which is something fairly interesting as well. You know, the guy who... You know, the guy on
that's
the
the guy he was talking about.
Yeah, and now he said... Oh, I thought you were talking about Putin, because they're both in the little Satan bunkers, just different kinds.
Oh, no, it's Vladimir Soloviev.
Yeah, it is crazy to think that he's now down there in that little lair, and he just looks like he hates his life. Like, every time you see him, he just looks like he hates it.
Yeah, he probably does. Like, you can't be Satan reincarnating like your life.
Boy, I love my life. I love lying to people because I've been told to, and I get paid. But anyways, with that, I just noticed the time, Matthew, and oh boy, would you look at the time. And so with that, it's now time for us to wrap up tonight's stream with one final question from the live chat. And so with that, who is the lucky last person? Let's throw in that lucky last question from the chat.
All right, and that viewer is going to be Benjamin Ellsbury, who says, Enforcer, can you discuss the status of the foreign fighters? How are they doing? And any and all details you'd like to share.
So, from what we can tell, the foreign fighters are doing somewhat well. However, we have noticed that over the past 10 months, there have been individual instances in some of these units of corruption. For example, there was a very infamous Polish leader of a unit that was ordering his soldiers to loot Ukrainian houses and such things. It appears that the Ukrainians have either deported that man or arrested him, and they've also spread out that unit into other units to try and remove the bad elements as best as possible, or at least have them fall into the radio I guess you could say the static of units that are not corrupt and not doing questionable stuff. So that was a little bit of a problem at the start of the war, but once again, that kind of encouraged bringing in random people from around the world and allowing them to engage in war. You can sometimes run into that kind of thing, but luckily they were able to take care of that. Right now, at this moment, it appears that most Foreign Legion units are either involved in the areas of Bakhmut, or they are further north in the Svatove area. We haven't seen many of them beyond that area, and it appears that the Ukrainians have largely reserved the Foreign Legion for use all the way from Kharkiv and down into the Bakhmut area, and they're not allowing them to move into the Donetsk front, the southern front, or the Kherson front when that was active. And it appears, based off of the different nations that these units are coming from, some of them perform much better than others, and some of them don't really perform well at all. I'm not going to say the ones that do not perform well at all, because, you know, some people might get miffed about that, but some of them, like the American Legion units, the British Legion units, and the Georgian Legion units, along with the French legions, are doing incredibly well, and we see them getting involved in heavy firefights a lot, and it appears that the Ukrainians are leaning on those units heavily to sometimes fill in gaps that the Ukrainians are not able to fill in. So, interestingly enough, that is something that does go on. We don't really get a lot of individual news day by day to really gauge how well each one's doing, where they're being used, and how effective they are. But whenever we get any information, it seems as though there are just a handful of countries that really stick out. It's the Georgians, the Americans, the British, the French, and then also, well, yeah, those are just pretty much the four. Every once in a while, you'll see some Canadian volunteers. It seems as though they kind of fall, though, under British units most times, and there's kind of like a mix of British and Canadian volunteers, or Canadian and American volunteers in the same unit, and those are kind of hybrid units, but those still do exceptionally well. So with that, I hope that gives as much information as we know off the top of our heads about what the Foreign Legion units are doing and how they're performing. And so with that, I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. Eric, tonight is Sunday. We just got done running the Sunday fundraiser. It's up at the top of the live chat right now. But I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure reporting the news to y'all once again and helping to fundraise another $6.4 thousand in support of Ukraine. It's only possible through y'all that we're able to keep this channel running through viewer support and super chats during the weekdays, and also to keep these fundraisers blowing over their goals and helping out Ukrainians so much for this long in the war. We've only been able to attribute the support we've been able to raise and this channel running thanks to all of y'all and y'all's generosity and kindness. It's unbelievable to think that y'all have been so generous and kind as to be able to help us to run these fundraisers this far into the war and still exceed expectations by and large on every single aspect. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope y'all have enjoyed tonight's stream. I hope y'all got a couple of laughs. I hope y'all got to know the information y'all wanted to know about what's going on in the war today. And I will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all so much once again for watching. Stay safe, take care, good luck, and also make sure to enjoy y'all's Mondays off as well. And Slava Ukraini! Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші ворожі, свіженькі, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що